Chapter 1289. 40% of the profits might seem like a lot, but it was not unacceptable. Just as Shao Chun had said, without the Sacred Palace faction, it would be impossible for the Sky Mist sect and the 100 Spirits sect to occupy the Windstone Culvert. Therefore, there were only two outcomes. The first was that everyone would split the profits together. Regardless of whether it was the Sky Mist sect or the 100 Spirits sect, they would receive a much smaller share of the profits. This was the first outcome. As for the second outcome, it would be a life and death struggle. No one wanted the profits, and both sides would suffer. Therefore, the Sacred Palace faction's demand for 40% was actually not much. Shao Chun did not wait for Wang Qikuan's reply and left after leaving a few words behind. Brother Wang, think about it carefully, or you could discuss it with Brother Mu. The Sacred Palace faction wants 40%. As for the remaining 60%, I don't care how you split it. These are my conditions. Give me a reply by tomorrow morning. With that, Shao Chun disappeared into the darkness with the Qing Emperor and returned to the Sacred Palace faction's encampment. Watching Shao Chun's departing figure, Wang Qikuan stood in the same spot for a long time. In the end, he chose to look for Brother Mu. He did not care about Wang Qikuan and Brother Mu's decision. After returning to the Sacred Palace faction's encampment, Shao Chun told everyone about the battle against the Blackstone sect the next day. After telling everyone to get ready, Shao Chun began to regulate his breathing. There was bound to be a great battle tomorrow. Although the 9 great factions were now in an alliance, it would not be easy to defeat the Blackstone sect. As one of the 5 great factions that was second only to the main faction, the Blackstone sect's strength could not be underestimated. Therefore, it was necessary to adjust his condition. The night was deep, like the calm before the storm. The night seemed to be quieter than usual, and even the sound of the wind seemed to have disappeared. On such a quiet night, just as the sky was about to brighten, a guest arrived at the Sacred Palace faction's encampment. It was the leader of the 100 Spirits sect faction, Brother Mu. Brother Mu personally came to meet with Shao Chun. The two of them discussed in the tent for a while before Brother Mu left. After personally seeing Brother Mu off, Shao Chun stood there with a faint smile on his face. Brother Mu had finally agreed, which was not too different from Shao Chun's expectations. As for the final distribution, the Sacred Palace would take 40%, the 100 Spirits sect would take 40%, and the remaining 20% would go to the Sky Mist sect. This distribution plan was acceptable to both the Sacred Palace and the 100 Spirits sect, but the Sky Mist sect was the only one who would suffer a loss. But what could they do? If they were not strong enough, they could only get a smaller share. However, while Brother Mu agreed to Shao Chun's conditions, he also raised his own request. In the battle tomorrow, Shao Chun would join forces with Brother Mu to deal with the leader of the Blackstone sect faction, Shi Tian. As the leading disciple of the Blackstone sect, Shi Tian was ranked 6th among the prospective saints of the Heavenly Note sect. It was said that his cultivation had just broken through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm a month ago. He was very strong, and Brother Mu alone was not his match. They had to join forces with Shao Chun to have a chance. Shao Chun naturally would not refuse Brother Mu's request. After all of this was based on defeating the Blackstone sect faction. If they were unable to defeat the Blackstone sect faction, then everything they had said before would be empty talk, and no one would benefit at that time. He just broke through to the peak of the Tao Emperor stage a month ago. Shao Chun muttered softly as his gaze seemed to pierce through the veil of night to look at the Blackstone sect's encampment in the distance. The night passed quickly. On the morning of the next day, the 9 great sects that were gathered in the valley started to encircle the Blackstone sect's encampment at the same time. The disciples of the Blackstone sect had naturally noticed the movements of the 9 great sections. At this moment, Shi Tian and the other candidates of the Blackstone sect had received the news within the enormous wooden house at the end of the encampment. Including Shi Tian, a total of 8 candidates of the Blackstone sect had entered Heavenly Valley. Merely in terms of numbers alone, the Blackstone sect had crushed the other sections. At this moment, the 8 of them sat in a circle with Shi Tian at the seat of the head, and he looked at the 7 people below him. Sure, Jean Tian said coldly. Since they want to court death, then we'll fulfill their wishes. Junior brothers, remember that the outcome of this battle is actually in our hands. Sure, Jean Tian had known about the alliance of the 9 great sects since the beginning, but he never cared about it. The reason was very simple. It was because he had absolute confidence in the strength of the Blackstone sect faction. Even if the 9 great sects were to form an alliance, the Blackstone sect faction would have enough strength to defeat them. Of course, Sure Jintian's confidence was based on something, but he had overlooked a variable, and that variable was the Sacred Palace faction. If the Sacred Palace faction had not joined, then the 100 Spirits sect and the other great sects would indeed find it difficult to contend with the Blackstone sect. However, the Blackstone sect had an overwhelming advantage in the contest of candidates. But now that the Sacred Palace faction had also joined the alliance, this situation naturally changed. After all, although the Sacred Palace faction was small in number, they were all elites. It was a pity that Sure Jintian hadn't realized this yet. Following Sure Jintian's order to prepare for battle, the 500 disciples of the Blackstone sect were standing guard in a huge open space at the bottom of the valley outside the Blackstone sect faction's encampment. After so many days, the various great sects could be said to be well aware of the situation in the valley. Therefore, the disciples of the 9 great sects did not think of launching a sneak attack, because it was impossible. They surrounded the Blackstone sect faction from the front, and both sides faced each other. At the same time, Sure Jintian led the 7 candidates of the Blackstone sect faction to the front of the 2 factions, and his eyes immediately locked onto Brother Mu. Brother Mu was the leader of the 100 Spirits sect, and Sure Jintian naturally knew that Brother Mu was the strongest in the training ground, so he naturally paid more attention to him. As for the others, they were directly ignored by Sure Jintian. Brother Mu, it seems that you won't give up until you see the coffin. Some things are destined to not belong to you, so you can't force it. Otherwise, the consequences will be very serious. Sure Jintian, cut the crap. As the saying goes, those who see it have a share. Since we've all seen the Yin stone culvert, let's split it. With Xiao Chun by his side, Brother Mu was much more confident. He was indeed no match for Sure Jintian in a one-on-one fight, but with Xiao Chun, Brother Mu was at least 80% confident that he could defeat Sure Jintian. After all, Brother Mu had personally experienced Xiao Chun's strength. With confidence in his heart, he naturally spoke with a lot more confidence. However, Sure Jintian's face darkened when he heard Brother Mu's words, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1290. Big Brother Mu's attitude caused faint killing intent to arise in Sure Jintian's heart. The 2 of them weren't strangers, and they were the leaders of their respective sections. So, they'd come into contact with each other on many occasions. However, Big Brother Mu was absolutely courteous to Sure Jintian every time they met. But Big Brother Mu actually had the courage to speak to Sure Jintian in such a manner. At the same time that Sure Jintian was furious, he was slightly puzzled as well. Sure Jintian was very clearly aware of Big Brother Mu's ability, and it could be said that Sure Jintian was absolutely confident in his ability to defeat Big Brother Mu, especially now that he'd broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm. Even though he'd just broken through, his combat strength had once more widened the gap between him and Big Brother Mu. But even then, Big Brother Mu actually dared to speak to him in such a manner. Sure Jintian laughed loudly and angrily. Haha, good, good, good. Big Brother Mu, looks like you really won't cry until you see the coffin. Very good. Since it's like that, then let me see exactly where your confidence comes from. Attack. Since it had already come to this, Sure Jintian couldn't be bothered to waste his breath on Big Brother Mu and the others. An alliance of the 9 sects? Do they think they can challenge the Blackstone sect with just this? Since they were able to become one of the 5 great sects of the Heavenly Music Sun Palace, the strength of the Blackstone sect isn't just for show. As soon as Sure Jintian finished speaking, the disciples of the Blackstone sect attacked at the same time, and they charged towards the members of the 9 great sections. None of the disciples of the Blackstone sect revealed cowardice when facing the 9 great sects at the same time. Perhaps this was the pride of the disciples of the Blackstone sect as one of the 5 great sections. In the heavenly Sun Palace, besides the main branch, the disciples of the Blackstone sect really didn't fear the members of the other sections. So, when facing a mere alliance of the 9 great sects now, the disciples of the Blackstone sect didn't reveal the slightest bit of fear. When the disciples of the Blackstone sect attacked, Big Brother Mu shouted coldly when he saw this. Attack! Since they'd already decided to become enemies with the Blackstone sect, then there was naturally no way out. Big Brother Mu wasn't afraid at all. As he shouted, the disciples of the 9 great sects charged out like wolves and tigers. You guys go too. Don't hold back. Everyone rushed out, but beside Xiao Chun, the people from the sacred palace did not move. With the pride of Chun Ling and the others, they naturally would not listen to Brother Mu's orders. When it came to the pride in their hearts, the Sacred Palace faction was definitely not much less than the Blackstone sect faction. Therefore, after Brother Mu's voice fell, Chun Ling and the others had no intention of making a move at all. They waited until Xiao Chen's voice fell before the Sacred Palace group rushed out. Compared to the disciples from the other factions, the Sacred Palace faction had the least number of disciples. However, as Chun Ling and the rest made their moves, the terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations instantly attracted the attention of many. Most people were unfamiliar with the Holy Palace faction, so they didn't know which faction Chun Ling and the others belonged to. However, from the spiritual energy fluctuations on their bodies, it was clear that each of them was more terrifying than the last. Not only were the disciples of the Blackstone sect shocked, but even the disciples of the other 8 sects of the Alliance were stunned. Wang Chiquan was in the crowd, and at this moment there was a lingering fear. He couldn't help but recall what Xiao Chun had said to him last night. Without the Sacred Palace faction, the Sky Mist sect and the 100 Spirit sect factions would only be like drawing water with a bamboo basket. Therefore, the Sacred Palace faction asking for 40% of the profits was not excessive. He originally thought that Xiao Chun was asking for too much, but now it seemed that Xiao Chen's words were not false at all. The Sacred Palace faction was simply a gathering camp of monsters. In particular, Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chen Yu, and Tian Yu. Their power was no weaker than the prospective chosens of the Taiyang sect and Tianyin sect. It was hard to imagine how the Sacred Palace faction could have so many monsters. However, after a brief moment of shock, Wang Chiquan's heart was filled with a trace of ecstasy. With so many monsters in the Sacred Palace faction, there was no doubt that they would win this battle. Their hearts were wild with joy. However, on the other hand, the disciples of the Blackstone sect tightly frowned, including Shi Jintian. At that moment, a hint of seriousness flashed in their eyes as they looked at Chun Ling and the other 3. These 4 were very strong, but where did they come from? Shi Jintian didn't know. The strength displayed by the Sacred Palace faction had shocked everyone. At the same time, the battle had broken out. At this moment, only Shi Jintian, Brother Mu, and Xiao Chun had yet to move. There was no time to deal with Chun Ling and the others for the time being. Shi Jintian looked at Brother Mu again, but when he saw Xiao Chun beside Brother Mu, a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Xiao Chun was completely unaffected, but now that Xiao Chun was standing beside Brother Mu, it was obvious that the 2 were planning to join forces to deal with him. Brother Mu, your confidence comes from him? Shi Jintian had always been curious about where Brother Mu's confidence came from, but now it seemed like it should have come from Xiao Chun. However, Xiao Chun was just a nobody, so Shi Jintian didn't think that Xiao Chun was very strong. Upon hearing Shi Jintian's words, Brother Mu smiled and said, "So what if there is?" Brother Mu had similarly witnessed the strength of Chun Ling and the others earlier, so he was even more confident in his heart. As a result, Brother Mu was even more calm and confident when facing Shi Jintian. Shi Jintian couldn't figure out why Brother Mu was even more confident than before, so he simply stopped thinking about it. His face sank as he shouted in a low voice, Since it's like that, then let me personally shatter your confidence." As he spoke, Shi Jintian directly attacked. The aura of perfection of the Tao Emperor stage shot into the sky from his body. At the same time, the spatial ring in his hand flashed, and a saber appeared in his hand. When they saw Shi Jintian attack, Brother Mu and Xiao Chun naturally wouldn't be careless. Two shocking auras shot into the sky as well, and it was impossible to imagine that their battle last night was even more terrifying than it was. Even though Xiao Chun and Brother Mu had a great battle last night, to be honest, both of them had held back. Xiao Chun hadn't utilized the strength of his body, and Brother Mu hadn't gone all out as well. However, they were facing Shi Jintian today, so it was impossible for them to continue holding back. As soon as they attacked, Xiao Chun erupted with his tempered battle body, whereas Brother Mu's aura was even stronger than last night. Brother Mu was the first to speak with a smile when he sensed Xiao Chen's aura that was even stronger than last night. "Looks like you held back last night. Aren't you the same?" Xiao Chen smiled when he heard this. As soon as he finished speaking, the three of them moved in unison. Sword, saber, and spear collided fiercely. As soon as they attacked, Xiao Chun collided head-on with Shi Jintian. Shi Jintian's face sank when they collided head-on, and then he shouted in a low voice, "Who exactly are you? Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation." Chapter 1291. He didn't have the slightest impression of Xiao Chun. It was even to the extent that Shi Jintian didn't know that there was such a figure in the heavenly yin-yang sect. He originally thought that Xiao Chun was just an ordinary disciple. If that was the case, then it made sense that he didn't have any impression of him. However, after the collision with Xiao Chun, Shi Jintian's expression changed drastically when he sensed the powerful force coming from Xiao Chen's sword. The unfamiliar fellow before him was definitely not an ordinary disciple. His strength wasn't much weaker than Brother Mu's at all. In other words, even amongst the numerous candidates in the heavenly yin-yang sect, Xiao Chen's strength was sufficient to rank in the top 10. It was clearly impossible for Shi Jintian to not have any impression of someone whose strength was comparable to the top 10 candidates. That was why Shi Jintian questioned Xiao Chun. "Who exactly are you?" Xiao Chun didn't answer Shi Jintian's question. His expression was still as tranquil as before. The dustless sword in his hand moved to the side and stabbed towards Shi Jintian's chest in a tricky manner. The sudden attack directly interrupted Shi Jintian's thoughts. Shi Jintian had no choice but to toss aside his thoughts and raise his saber to block Xiao Chen's attack. In terms of strength, there was still a gap between Xiao Chun and Shi Jintian, and that gap came from the suppression of their cultivations. Since coming to the central world, Xiao Chun had gained a deeper understanding of a principle. It was impossible to surmount a realm of cultivation to battle the monstrous geniuses of the central world. That was something that even the chosen on the hallowed rankings couldn't accomplish. If one's cultivation was higher by a minor realm, then it would be an unreasonable suppression. There was nothing that could be done about it. As a result, the difference in the cultivation of the monstrous geniuses of the central world was a huge factor. Especially now that everyone had basically reached the Tao Emperor realm. Every single breakthrough wasn't a simple matter. So a higher cultivation would be an unreasonable suppression. Xiao Chun was no match for Shi Jintian in a one-on-one battle. However, it was not just Xiao Chun alone. There was also Brother Mu by his side. Therefore, Shi Jintian was at a disadvantage when facing the two of them. At first, Shi Jintian was full of confidence. After all, he was no stranger to Brother Mu and had an absolute chance of winning. Even when Xiao Chun appeared in the end, Shi Jintian didn't take it seriously because he didn't think that Xiao Chen's strength would be very strong. However, the reality gave Shi Jintian a hard slap in the face. He thought that Xiao Chun would not be very strong, but his strength was not inferior to Brother Mu at all. This naturally disrupted Shi Jintian's entire plan. In addition, Chun Ling, Long Qing, and the others from the Sacred Palace were also extremely valiant. They beat up the prospective chosen disciple from the Blackstone sect to the point where they couldn't even put up a fight. Chunling, Longqing, Chunyu, and Tianyu. The four of them were actually not much weaker than Shaochen. In terms of strength, they were enough to rank in the top 10 of the Taiyang sect. It could be said that the appearance of the Sacred Palace faction was a variable that Shi Jintian had not expected at all. If it weren't for the Sacred Palace faction, Shi Jintian and the Blackstone sect faction might not have lost this battle. However, with the addition of the Sacred Palace faction, it was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. It instantly tipped the scales of victory between the two sides. In the fierce battle, Shi Jintian's main target was Shao Chun. It could be said that Shi Jintian hated Shao Chun to the bone, even more than he hated Brother Mu. If it weren't for the appearance of Shao Chun and the Sacred Palace faction, the situation wouldn't have turned out like this. Therefore, Shi Jintian's hatred for Shao Chun and the Sacred Palace faction could be said to be the most intense. By focusing all his energy on dealing with Shao Chun, the pressure on Brother Mu was naturally reduced by a lot. Shao Chun was under a lot of pressure after being focused on by Shi Jintian. However, with the rapid self-healing ability of the tempered battle body, Shao Chun was able to hold on. The injuries on his body were rapidly recovering. Shi Jintian was extremely shocked by Shao Chun's terrifying self-healing ability. Was this kind of self-healing ability already considered terrifying? It wasn't even inferior to the Phoenix Huang Yi clan. The bloodline power of the Phoenix Huang Yi clan possessed extremely powerful self-healing abilities. Even completely awakened Phoenix Huang Yi clan bloodline could be reborn from the ashes. It was precisely because of this terrifying self-healing ability that the Phoenix Huang Yi clan could become one of the top 3 clans in the beast race. However, the self-healing ability displayed by Shao Chun at this time, in Shi Jintian's opinion, was already not inferior to the Phoenix Huang Yi clan. Under normal circumstances, Shao Chun should have been seriously injured even if he didn't die. However, the fact was that Shao Chun was not only not seriously injured, but there wasn't even a single wound on his body. Every time Shi Jintian injured Shao Chun, the wound would miraculously self-heal in a short while. This shocked Shi Jintian and infuriated him. With such a terrifying self-healing ability, it was extremely difficult for Shi Jintian to seriously injure Shao Chun. In addition, Brother Mu was constantly attacking him, so Shi Jintian had no choice but to be on guard. The battle soon reached its climax. One could imagine the pressure Shi Jintian was facing against Shao Chun and Brother Mu. In particular, Shao Chun's strange and terrifying self-healing ability made Shi Jintian helpless. Brother Mu, stop fooling around. End the battle as soon as possible. Shao Chun had always been under great pressure from Shi Jintian, while Brother Mu took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. At this time, Shao Chun was also a little tired, so he said this. It was not that Shao Chun couldn't hold on, but Shao Chun didn't want to consume too much strength on Shi Jintian. After all, he still had to distribute the benefits. If he consumed too much strength, there might be a sudden change in the situation. Although he was with Brother Mu now, if his combat power dropped too much, Brother Mu would probably take care of him as well. Therefore, he had to be on guard against these things. Hearing Shao Chun's words, Brother Mu was not stupid. He knew what Shao Chun was thinking. He immediately nodded slightly and then shouted in a deep voice, Shi Jintian, you have lost this battle. Flaming spear. As soon as he finished speaking, Brother Mu thrust out his spear. The long spear was surrounded by hot flames. This flaming spear could be said to be Brother Mu's strongest killing move. Naturally, its grade had reached the saint level. In the face of Brother Mu's killing move, Shi Jintian naturally didn't dare to be careless. He knew the power of Brother Mu's move. He immediately ignored Shao Chun and turned to face Brother Mu's killing move head-on. However, just as Shi Jintian turned around and was about to deal with Brother Mu's killing move, Shao Chun's faint voice sounded. Shi Jintian, have you forgotten that you still have me? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1292. In the face of Brother Mu's flame spear, Even Shi Jintian could not treat it casually. However, just as Shi Jintian turned his attention to Brother Mu, Xiao Chen's voice sounded. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Shi Jintian's eyebrows twitched. Yes, he had forgotten about this. Xiao Chen was more difficult to deal with than Brother Mu. Without giving Shi Jintian too much time to think, Xiao Chen also displayed his killer move as soon as he finished speaking. He slowly pointed his finger downwards, performing the sixth finger of the nine heaven sword finger, the fish intestine sword finger. A dark red light flashed. Just like the nine luo sword chi, Xiao Chen had also cultivated the fish intestine sword finger to the perfection of martial arts over the years. However, compared to the nine luo sword chi, the fish intestine sword finger's lethality was definitely much greater. Facing the killing moves of Brother Mu and Xiao Chen at the same time, Shi Jintian frowned. His instincts told him that Xiao Chen's fish intestine sword finger was a deadly threat. In other words, Xiao Chen's fish intestine sword finger was definitely more dangerous than Brother Mu's flame spear. Therefore, Shi Jintian had no choice but to turn around and deal with Xiao Chen's fish intestine sword finger with all his strength. Since Xiao Chen's fish intestine sword finger was obviously more powerful than Brother Mu's flame spear, he naturally had to choose to deal with Xiao Chen's attack first. The fish intestine sword finger was able to deal with Xiaodio's fish intestine sword finger, but in terms of power, the fish intestine sword finger was definitely not as powerful as the flame spear. Unlike the flame spear's destructive aura, the fish intestine sword finger was silent, and only a finger-sized sword light flashed by. However, it was in this silence that the fish bowel sword finger inadvertently emitted an aura that made one's hair stand on end. The blood-red sword light flashed. In response, Shi Jintian did not hesitate. He directly punched out and shouted angrily, "Exploding stone!" Shi Jintian's fist seemed to have turned into a piece of black stone as it ruthlessly collided with the fish intestine sword finger. Shi Jintian's fist was also a Saint-class martial skill. When it collided with the fish intestine sword finger, there was a loud explosion as the space started to collapse. He successfully blocked Xiao Chen's fish intestine sword finger, but as expected, Brother Mu's flame spear also hit Shi Jintian. It was also at the last moment that Shi Jintian forcefully avoided his vitals, so his life was not in danger. However, after taking Brother Mu's killing move, Shi Jintian was also seriously injured. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and there was a fist-sized bloody hole in his abdomen. Blood kept gushing out. With one hand covering the bloody hole in his abdomen, Shi Jintian looked coldly at Brother Mu and then at Xiao Chen. His eyes were burning with anger. Today, he was defeated by the joint forces of Xiao Chen and Brother Mu, so it was easy to imagine the anger in Shi Jintian's heart. However, the current situation did not allow Shi Jintian to hesitate for too long. Now that he was seriously injured, he would definitely not be able to gain an advantage if the battle continued. Forcefully suppressing the anger in his heart, Shi Jintian coldly shouted, "Retreat." After being heavily injured, Shi Jintian finally gave the order to retreat. Hearing these words, although the disciples of the Blackstone sect were unwilling, they were able to clearly understand the situation. Without thinking too much, the disciples quickly retreated. The disciples of the Blackstone sect retreated, and the disciples of the other 9 sects did not pursue them. The greatest contribution to this great victory was, without a doubt, the Sacred Palace. After this battle, the people from the various factions did not dare to underestimate the Sacred Palace faction in the slightest. Although the Sacred Palace faction was few in number, each one of them was more abnormal than the other. They were practically monsters. Not only Xiao Chen, but there was also Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chun Yu, Tian Yu, and the rest. Although their strength was not as good as the Sacred Palace faction, it was definitely not too far off. After the battle, it was time to split the spoils. Brother Mu took a deep look at Xiao Chen. Just as Xiao Chen had guessed, Brother Mu had thought of kicking the Sacred Palace faction away, but after personally witnessing the Sacred Palace faction's strength, Brother Mu dispelled this idea. First of all, Judging from Xiao Chen's current situation, it was obvious that he hadn't been affected much, and his combat strength was still there. Secondly, the combat strength of the other people from the Sacred Palace, especially Chen Ling and the others, made Brother Mu wary. If he kicked the Sacred Palace faction away at this time, it was very likely that both sides would suffer losses. Therefore, even if he was unwilling, Brother Mu could only accept the Sacred Palace faction, taking 40% of the spoils. After taking a deep look at Xiao Chun, Brother Mu withdrew his gaze. At this time, the disciples of the other factions also gathered around with joyful expressions. The battle was finally over, and it was finally time to split the spoils of victory. However, they clearly did not know that Brother Mu had no intention of sharing the Yin stone culvert with them from the beginning. Inadvertently, the 100 Spirits sect, Sky Mist sect, and Sacred Palace faction stood together with their backs against the entrance of the Yin stone culvert, blocking the disciples of the other 6 factions. Nothing out of the ordinary was discovered. However, just as the disciples of the 6 factions were secretly rejoicing, Brother Mu slowly opened his mouth to speak. "Everyone, I have a presumptuous request. This Yin stone culvert is a precious treasure, but there are too many monks and too little gruel. If so many of us were to split it, how many Yin stones would each person get? Therefore, I hope that my fellow brothers and sisters can do my Brother Mu a favor and let me have this Yin stone culvert, Junior Brother Wang Qikuan and Brother Xiao Chun. We will remember this moment and repay you in the future." Since the Blackstone sect faction had been defeated, Brother Mu naturally did not hide anything at this time. Instead, he very straightforwardly stated his request. Hearing Brother Mu's words, the originally joyful disciples of the 6 factions all changed their expressions. In the blink of an eye, they looked at Brother Mu with extreme anger, and some of them even shouted angrily, "Brother Mu, what do you mean? You want to monopolize the Yin stone culvert? Don't forget, without us, how could you have defeated the Blackstone sect faction?" Even an idiot knew what Brother Mu meant. He was getting rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. After defeating the Blackstone sect faction, Brother Mu, Wang Qikuan, and Xiao Chun had joined forces to monopolize the Yin stone culvert. There was no need to hide it any longer. Therefore, Brother Mu coldly smiled when he heard the disciples' words. "That's right, we want to monopolize this Yin stone culvert. What do you think? Step forward if you don't agree." As he spoke, a soaring aura erupted from Brother Mu's body. His cold gaze swept across the disciples of the 6 factions, and there was a thick chill in his eyes. Men die in pursuit of wealth, and birds die in pursuit of food. In the face of such a precious treasure like the Yin stone culvert, Brother Mu's actions were understandable. Moreover, Xiao Chun did not feel that there was any problem with driving the 6 factions away, because once the disciples of the 6 factions were allowed to participate in the distribution of the Yin stone culvert, it would affect the distribution of the Yin stone culvert. Regardless of how many Yin stones they distributed, it would ultimately affect the interests of the Sacred Palace faction. Giving an extra Yin stone to others meant that the Sacred Palace faction would have one less Yin stone. This was the most simple logic. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1293. Under Brother Mu's gaze. Although the disciples of the 6 major factions were unwilling to admit defeat, they did not want to lose their temper. At the same time, more people inadvertently turned their eyes to Xiao Chun and the Sacred Palace faction, who stood beside Brother Mu without saying a word. Apart from Brother Mu's 100 Spirits sect faction, the disciples of the 6 major factions were also afraid of Xiao Chen's Sacred Palace faction. As for Wang Qikuan's Sky Mist sect faction, they were directly ignored by everyone. The Sky Mist sect faction was not strong and did not have much of a deterrent effect on everyone. On the contrary, Xiao Chen's Sacred Palace faction had instilled a deep sense of fear in everyone after this battle. There is no need to mention Xiao Chun, as he was someone who could fight Brother Mu. Other than that, the Holy Palace seemed to only have a dozen or so people, but every one of them was ridiculously strong. Although they were few in number, every one of them was an elite. How could such a faction not be feared? With the addition of the Sacred Palace faction, the disciples of the six major factions knew that they no longer had the chance to get a share of the Windstone culvert. They had been used as a tool for nothing and gained nothing in the end. But who could they blame? They did not have the strength, so they could only be beaten. Although they were angry and unwilling, in the end, one of the leading disciples of one of the factions stood out and glared coldly at Brother Mu, Xiao Chun, and Wang Qikuan. He then said fiercely, "Brother Mu, Xiao Chun, Wang Qikuan, I remember what happened today. Let's go." Even if the six major factions joined forces, they were no match for Brother Mu, Xiao Chun, Wang Qikuan, and the others. Moreover, once they fought, the disciples of the six major factions would likely be directly crippled. In that case, just like the Leaf family faction, they would not be able to find Wind stones in the following period of time. This also meant that they could only miss this opportunity when the heavenly Valley opened. There was still a lot of time. Less than a month had passed, and there were still 5 months before the half-year deadline. Rather than fight to the death here, it was better to preserve their strength and go elsewhere to find Wind stones. Following the departure of the first faction's disciple, the remaining 5 factions naturally took the initiative to withdraw as well. However, before they left, the eyes of the disciples from these factions burned with raging flames of fury. There are even some who did not forget to open their mouths and threaten the other factions. However, Brother Mu and Xiao Chun did not care about their threat at all. Why should they care about the threat of a weakling? If they were no match today, would they be tomorrow? They paid no heed to the threats of the 6 great factions. As the 6 great factions left, only the 100 Spirits sect, Sky Mist sect, and Sacred Palace factions were left in the valley. Xiao Chun and the others looked at each other, and then stepped into the culvert. As soon as they entered the culvert, waves of cold wind assaulted their faces. Moreover, compared to the outside world, the cold wind in the cave was clearly several times stronger, as expected of Fengyang. Moreover, as they went deeper and deeper, Xiao Chun and the others gradually saw a large number of Wind stones of various sizes. They were densely embedded on the walls of the cave. The cave wasn't very deep, and it was only a little over 100 meters deep. However, there were at least 700 Wind stones on the walls. So many Wind stones caused Xiao Chun, Big Brother Mu, and Wang Qikuan to unconsciously reveal burning expressions. It was especially so for Xiao Chun. With these Wind stones, he would definitely be able to break through to the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm. So long as he attained the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm, Xiao Chun wouldn't have to fear anyone in Ill Wind Gorge, including the so-called First Holy Son, Zhu Mujue. After a simple investigation, Brother Mu said, "According to our agreement, our 100 Spirits sect and Sacred Palace will each get 40%, and the Sky Mist sect will get 20%. The thought of taking advantage of the Sacred Palace had already arisen in Brother Mu's mind. The Sacred Palace's strength made Brother Mu fearful, and he didn't dare to make the slightest move. Xiao Chen nodded when he heard Brother Mu's words. Even though Wang Qikuan was slightly depressed in his heart, he could only nod in agreement. The Sky Mist faction was only given 20%. However, to Wang Qikuan, he had to accept this even if he did not want to. The reason was simple. The Sky Mist faction was the weakest. Even Wang Qikuan himself knew that if it weren't for the little bit of relationship he had with Brother Mu and Xiao Chun would have kicked the Sky Mist sect away without any hesitation and let the 2 sects share the Wind stone culvert equally. Therefore, Wang Qikuan could only be content with the fact that he could still get 20% of the profits. As the saying goes, a greedy man is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. There were times when you clearly couldn't take it all, but still insisted on taking it all. In the end, you would only end up stuffing yourself to death. The 3 of them had no objections to the distribution. Very soon, the disciples of the 3 factions entered the culvert and began to mine the Wind stones inside. I wonder what the Blackstone sect is thinking. They've occupied this Wind stone culvert for so many days, but they haven't mined it? Chunyu chuckled as he looked at the Wind stones on both sides of the culvert. Maybe they're overconfident. After all, they're one of the 5 great factions, and they think that no one will dare to steal from them. Chunling chuckled in response to Chun Yu's teasing. The Blackstone sect was indeed overconfident, or perhaps Shijin Tian was too overconfident. They thought that no one would dare to touch the whiskers of the Blackstone sect. Little did they know that the Blackstone sect had suffered a double loss this time. The Windstones and the entire culvert were divided into 3 sections. Among them, the Sacred Palace and the 100 Spirits sect were the largest, each taking up half of the space. The Sky Mist sect only took up 20% of the space. The mining work proceeded in an orderly manner. Due to the lack of people in the Sacred Palace faction, Wang Qikuan even took the initiative to ask the Sky Mist sect disciples to help the Sacred Palace faction mine the Windstones. Of course, Wang Qikuan did not dare to covet the Windstones of the Sacred Palace faction. He was only doing this as a gesture of goodwill. Now that he knew what kind of monstrous existence the Sacred Palace faction was, Wang Qikuan would be courting death if he still dared to have any ideas about the Sacred Palace faction. Xiao Chen did not refuse Wang Qikuan's goodwill. After all, the Sacred Palace faction really did not have enough people. Xiao Chen and a dozen others wanted to mine the Windstones all by themselves. It was indeed a tedious and laborious task. Since Wang Qikuan had taken the initiative to help, Xiao Chen naturally would not refuse. With the help of Wang Qikuan's Sky Mist sect faction, the Windstones that belonged to the Sacred Palace faction were finally mined a day later. There were truly over 300 Windstones. Xiao Chen, Chunling, and the rest could not help but smile in the face of such a large number of Windstones. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1294. Xiao Chen did not choose to refine the Windstone in the valley, because he was worried that the disciples of the other sects would come. After all, the disciples of the Blackstone sect and the other 6 sects had left. They would probably spread the news of the existence of the Windstone culvert. When that happened, the disciples of the other sects would probably come. Brother Mu and Wang Qikuan shared the same thoughts as Xiao Chen. Therefore, the two of them also collected the Windstones but did not refine them immediately. The Blackstone sect had suffered a double loss because of their overconfidence. Xiao Chen and the other 2 naturally would not make the same mistake again. After collecting all the Windstones in the Windstone culvert, Xiao Chen prepared to leave the valley. Outside the Windstone culvert, Xiao Chen looked at Brother Mu and Wang Qikuan with a smile on his face. Since this matter is over, we'll part ways here. Haha, all right. Brother Xiao, please. After we leave the heavenly Valley, I will personally treat Brother Xiao and everyone from the Sacred Palace to a drink. Brother Mu laughed heartily. Compared to Brother Mu, Wang Qikuan's attitude toward Xiao Chen was very respectful. Moreover, it seemed like he had already made up his mind to cling onto the Sacred Palace faction's thighs in the future. Therefore, Wang Qikuan bowed respectfully after Brother Mu's words, completely treating himself as Xiao Chen's subordinate. Senior Brother Xiao Chen, if you need our Heavenly Mist sect's help in the future, you can send someone to inform me. I dare not disobey. Good? Come find me in my cave when the Heavenly Valley closes. Xiao Chen understood Wang Qikuan's intentions and gently patted him on the shoulder. A strange look flashed across Brother Mu's eyes when he saw the 2 of them acting like this, but he did not say anything. After a simple farewell, Xiao Chen did not linger and left with the Sacred Palace group. Wang Qikuan and Brother Mu sent them off with their eyes. When the Sacred Palace group had completely disappeared from sight, Brother Mu exhaled and looked at Wang Qikuan. Qikuan, have you really made up your mind? Brother Mu was clearly asking if Wang Qikuan had really decided to cling onto Xiao Chen's thighs. One had to know that some of the weaker factions in the Heavenly Solar sect would choose to attach themselves to the stronger factions. This was similar to how the various quasi-saint sects attached themselves to the Heavenly Solar sect, willingly becoming the Heavenly Solar sect's claws and hounds. However, the Heavenly Solar sect would not be able to escape if anything happened to the Sacred Palace faction. If anything happened to the Sacred Palace faction, the Heavenly Solar sect would not be able to escape from the Heavenly sect. In Brother Mu's view, the strength displayed by the sacred palace was indeed shocking, but their foundation was still shallow after all. Choosing to rely on them now wasn't a wise choice. Hearing Brother Mu's words, Wang Chikuan smiled faintly and said, "Providing help in a time of need is far better than adding flowers to a brocade. Moreover, Brother Mu should be clear about the situation of our Sky Mist sect. Who in the entire Sky Mist sect would be willing to interfere in this matter? I know what Brother Mu is worried about, but I'm well aware of Brother Xiao Chen's character. If I choose to rely on the Sacred Palace faction at a time like this, Brother Xiao Chen won't just sit back and do nothing when the time comes. He's a loyal and righteous person. What's more, the Sacred Palace faction has great potential." Wang Chikuan saw things very clearly. Not only did he see the potential of the Holy Palace, but he also saw through Xiao Chen's character. He also knew that providing help in a time of need was far better than adding flowers to a brocade. What the Sacred Palace faction could gain now was far more than what they could gain in the future. If they chose to rely on the Sacred Palace faction after its rise, the ruins would be completely different. This was just like how in a dynasty, the emperor's officials held a much higher position in his heart than the ordinary officials. Wang Chikuan cupped his hands towards Brother Mu and said, "Brother Mu, I'll also take my leave." "Sai, all right." Brother Mu nodded, and the two also took their leave. Unaware of the conversation between Brother Mu and Wang Chikuan, Xiao Chun and the others were already far away from the Yiwen Stone Culvert a day later. They found a safe place and stopped to cultivate. Xiao Chun also planned to stay here for a while to refine the Yiwen stones on him first. There were more than 300 Yiwen stones. For the dozen or so people from the Sacred Palace, each of them would receive a lot. It could be said that the harvest this time was quite bountiful. After evenly distributing the Yiwen stones on him, Xiao Chun divided everyone into two groups to refine the Yiwen stones. This was the Yiwen Valley after all, so they couldn't be careless. So, when one group was refining the Yiwen stones, another group had to be responsible for guarding them. Otherwise, it would be very dangerous if the Sacred Palace faction wasn't on guard at all once people from other factions arrived. No one had any objections to Xiao Chen's actions, and they quickly returned to cultivating according to Xiao Chen's instructions. Now that they had sufficient Yiwen stones, they naturally wouldn't waste any time. In the following period of time, everyone was refining the Yiwen stones with all their might. During this period of time, Qin Shu and the other two successfully broke through to the initial Tao Emperor realm with the help of the Yiwen stones. 5 days passed in a row, and Xiao Chun was finally about to break through. The aura on his body started to show signs of rebellion, and this was a sign that he was about to break through. Along with Xiao Chen's breakthrough, Chun Ling and the others in the surroundings were jolted awake, and a wisp of a smile flashed through their eyes as they looked at Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun was finally about to break through. Once he broke through to perfection in the Tao Emperor realm, Xiao Chun would possess the qualifications to ascend the hallowed rankings. At the same time, Bai Qiran's matter wouldn't be a cause for fear. Everyone was happy for Xiao Chen's breakthrough. At this moment, Xiao Chun was ceaselessly attacking the barrier to perfection in the Tao Emperor realm. Xiao Chun had experienced such breakthroughs countless times. So even though the barrier to perfection in the Tao Emperor realm was extraordinarily firm, Xiao Chun wasn't anxious at all, and he just attacked it step by step without end. A day passed, and the fluctuations of Xiao Chen's spirit energy grew more and more chaotic. However, right at this moment, a muffled bang resounded from within Xiao Chen's body, and the barrier to perfection in the Tao Emperor realm had finally been successfully broken through. Once the barrier was broken through, Xiao Chen's cultivation suddenly rose explosively, and it instantly rose to perfection in the Tao Emperor realm. At the same time, Xiao Chen immediately withdrew a Yiwen stone and started to refine and absorb it. The spirit energy in the surroundings was ceaselessly sucked into Xiao Chen's body like a whale, and the energy within the Yiwen stone swiftly entered Xiao Chen's limbs and meridians as well, and it ceaselessly condensed the spirit energy that was still slightly unstable after breaking through. For the sake of breaking through from the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm to the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm, Xiao Chun had spent an entire few years. Now that he'd broken through in one go, Xiao Chen's combat strength had naturally undergone a tremendous change, begging to be collected, begging to be recommended. Chapter 1295. After successfully breaking through, Xiao Chan finished refining all the Yin Wind stones in his possession a day later. He slowly opened his eyes, while a wisp of a faint smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. Perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. He finally had the qualifications to challenge the hallowed rankings. However, it was still a little too early to do so, and he still needed some time to stabilize his cultivation. After all, even though Xiao Chen's cultivation was at the same level as the chosen on the hallowed rankings, there was still a gap between them. No matter what, Xiao Chun had just broken through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. On the other hand, the chosen on the hallowed rankings had been at perfection of the Tao Emperor realm for a few years at the very least. His cultivation hadn't stabilized yet, so it wasn't the time to challenge the hallowed rankings for now. However, since he'd successfully broken through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, then the following matters would be much simpler. Moreover, after this breakthrough, even if Xiao Chan were to face Zhu Mujue, who was known as the first candidate, he would absolutely not be afraid of him. Even if he were to encounter Bai Qiran, he wouldn't dare to say that he could defeat her, but at least he would be able to put up a fight. Moreover, if Xiao Chun wanted to leave, Bai Qiran wouldn't be able to stop him. The breakthrough in his cultivation allowed Xiao Chun to feel much more confident. Right when Xiao Chun slowly opened his eyes, the four women arrived before Xiao Chun and passed the remaining Yin Wind stones to Xiao Chun. Their intentions were very clear. They hoped that Xiao Chun would use these Yin Wind stones to stabilize his cultivation as soon as possible. Xiao Chun smiled at the four women's kindness. "You can keep it for yourselves. Now that I want to stabilize my cultivation base, it's no longer enough to rely on the Yin Wind stone. I need time to settle down." Xiao Chun was right. Xiao Chun had already stabilized the areas that needed to be stabilized. As for the rest, he could only rely on time to slowly stabilize them. Moreover, after his cultivation had broken through, Xiao Chun felt that he had too few martial skills, especially sacred-level martial skills. He thought that after the Heavenly Yin Valley was over, he should go to the Martial Skills Hall of the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect to take a look. After all, the number of saint-level martial arts techniques collected by Supreme Saint sect should not be too small. Moreover, the saint-level martial arts techniques that Xiao Chun had mastered, whether it was the Jiu Luo Sword Chi or the Fish Intestine Sword Finger, were only low-level saint-level martial arts techniques. If he could cultivate a mid-level saint-level martial arts technique, it would be obvious that Xiao Chen's combat strength would increase. He did not accept the Yin Wind stones from the four women. First of all, the Yin Wind stones were extremely useful to the four women. Everyone had to improve after entering the Heavenly Yin Valley. Moreover, compared to him, the cultivation of the four women was indeed a little lower, especially Qin Shu, Under Flower Fairy, and Guling Yao. Under Xiao Chen's persuasion, the four women finally put away their respective Yin Wind stones. Because the others had not finished cultivating, Xiao Chen was basically responsible for guarding them for the rest of the time. He had finished refining all his Yin Wind stones, and his cultivation had broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm. It was indeed difficult for him to make any progress in a short period of time. Thus, Xiao Chun naturally took the initiative to play the role of guard. With Xiao Chen's protection, the others were naturally much more at ease when they cultivated. Not to mention anything else, Yun Kunyo and Bai Qiran, the two chosen on the hallowed rankings, hadn't entered the Heavenly Yin Valley this time. Without the two of them, Xiao Chun could be considered as one of the top figures in the entire Heavenly Yin Valley. Even if he encountered Zhu Mujue, Xiao Chun could still stand against him. Moreover, his chances of victory were very high. So, with Xiao Chun by their side, not to mention anything else, they should be able to do whatever they wanted in the Heavenly Yin Valley. Even if they were suppressed by numbers and couldn't defeat them, they were completely capable of retreating calmly. They didn't have to worry about their safety anymore. Everyone cultivated bitterly within the quiet forest. A few more days passed, and they'd finished refining all the wind stones they'd been allocated. At this point, they'd finished refining all the wind stones they'd obtained from the culvert. But regretfully, Chun-Ling, Long-Qing, Qin-Yu, and Tian Yu hadn't been able to break through, and they were still stuck at the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm. The four of them weren't like Xiao Chun, who'd broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm in one go. However, with their current cultivations, it probably wouldn't be difficult for them to break through if they gathered more wind stones. Besides the four of them, everyone else had obtained some gains this time. Moreover, along with their breakthroughs, the Sacred Palace's strength had naturally been strengthened once more, and it couldn't be compared to before at all. They had been here for almost half a month, and it was time for them to leave. Therefore, after everyone had finished cultivating, they rested for only a day before Xiao Chun led them out of the forest and continued their journey to the depths of the heavenly Valley. The closer they got to the depths, the more wind stones there were. In the next few days, Xiao Qin's group naturally obtained quite a few more wind stones, and Xiao Chun didn't take the majority of the wind stones. Instead, he distributed them equally, so everyone obtained the same amount of wind stones. They didn't encounter any danger all along the way. Even though they did encounter some disciples from the other sects, no battles broke out between them. Of course, because of their strength, the Sacred Palace wasn't afraid of fighting with any other sections. Just Xiao Chun alone was sufficient to deter the other sections. A few days passed peacefully. At this moment, Xiao Qin's group had completely entered the depths of the heavenly Valley's estate. The amount of wind stones here had indeed increased by quite a bit. On this day, Xiao Qin's group discovered that there were actually a few dozen wind stones of various sizes at the bottom of a huge ancient tree. This ancient tree was extremely huge, but it had branches and no leaves. The entire tree trunk and branches were jet black in color, as if they were made of steel. It was a very strange tree. Perhaps this was related to the environment of the heavenly Valley. Just as Xiao Qin's group was about to collect the wind stones, a cold shout suddenly sounded. "Put them down if you don't want to die." Following this cold shout, a group of over 100 people flew over from afar and quickly landed in front of Xiao Qin's group. The disciples of the main branch. When Xiao Chun saw the group of more than 100 people, he immediately recognized that they were disciples of the main branch. At the same time, the disciples of the main branch also recognized Xiao Chun and the others. The leader of the group, a prospective chosen, sneered and said, "Don't worry, we're all disciples of the main branch. So it's the Sacred Palace faction. I didn't expect you to dare to come so deep into this place." "Good. Looks like it's really a case of searching high and low only to find it by chance. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1296. He hadn't expected to encounter someone from the Sacred Palace here. The leading candidate was overjoyed because this was definitely a good opportunity to claim credit. If he could take down Xiao Chun here, wouldn't his senior brother by Chiron give him a great credit? The main branch was the strongest branch in the Heavenly Sun sect, and there was no dispute about this. However, the main branch was currently divided into 3 different factions. One faction supported by Chiron's faction, one faction supported Holy Maiden Yun Kunyo's faction, and the last faction was neutral. For example, the disciples led by Zhu Mujue belonged to the neutral faction. The 2 chosen on the hallowed rankings had divided the main branch into 3 factions, and all the disciples had chosen to join one of the factions. The group of main branch disciples that Xiao Chun and the others had encountered clearly belonged to Bai Chiron's faction. A wisp of undisguised coldness flickered in Xiao Chen's eyes, but he didn't care at all when he heard the disciples' words. He said indifferently, "What can you do with just a few of you?" Xiao Chen didn't take these disciples seriously at all. Not to mention now, even if he hadn't broken through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, Xiao Chun wouldn't fear them. Not to mention that Xiao Chen's cultivation had already broken through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, so it was even more impossible for him to take them seriously. Not to mention them. Even if Zhu Mujue came, Xiao Chen wouldn't fear him at all, unless Zhu Mujue came with a few hundred main branch disciples and used numbers to suppress the Sacred Palace's faction. Only then would Xiao Chen be able to retreat in the face of difficulties. The leading candidate's face sank when he saw that Xiao Chen wasn't afraid at all, and he said coldly, "You're still so stubborn even when you're about to die. You're simply courting death. Go take them down." He hadn't seen the strength of the Sacred Palace's faction, so he clearly didn't know how terrifying the Sacred Palace's faction was. As soon as he spoke, the main branch disciples behind him swarmed over. Xiao Chen smiled. "Big brother, second sister, senior brother Chen, I'll leave these ants to you." "It's just a small matter," Long Qing said with a smile. Xiao Chen did not plan to participate in this battle. Firstly, these guys were not a threat at all. Secondly, Xiao Chen did not want to expose his breakthrough. He knew that the one who really wanted to kill him was Bai Qiuran's younger brother, Bai Qiuyue. Moreover, to Xiao Chen, he could let the others go. After all, they were all disciples of the same sect. However, Xiao Chen had to kill Bai Qiuyue because he was Bai Qiuran's younger brother. He deserved to die. Previously, Wang Qikuan had already told him some information about Bai Qiuyue. He knew that she was known as the White Snake. She was shrewd, meticulous, and ruthless. She was extremely good at scheming and plotting. For such a person, Xiao Chen naturally hid his cultivation level in order to bait him. As long as Bai Qiuyue dared to show himself, Xiao Chen would kill him in one fell swoop. Presently, besides the members of the Sacred Palace, no one else knew that Xiao Chen had broken through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. At that time, he would definitely be able to give Bai Qiuyue a pleasant surprise. Xiao Chen had no intention to attack at all while he thought like this in his heart. On the other hand, Chun Ling and the others didn't show the slightest fear when facing the attacks of over 100 disciples from the main branch. Everyone attacked, and both sides were locked in an intense battle. On the other hand, Xiao Chen minded his own business and started to gather the Yin-Wind stones in the surroundings unhurriedly. When he saw that Xiao Chen had no intention to attack at all, the leader of the main branch immediately shouted in a low voice, "Xiao Chen, what's wrong? Are you a coward? You don't even have the courage to fight? Even ants dare to act so ferociously. Is there any need for me to personally deal with you? Die." As soon as the leader finished speaking, Long Qing sent a disciple flying with a punch, and then his figure flashed and appeared in front of that disciple before he sneered. This group of disciples from the main branch clearly wasn't strong. Besides the leader of the main branch who possessed some strength, the others weren't a match for the members of the Sacred Palace at all. Most of them were still at the Tao Emperor realm. Besides the chosen on the hallowed rankings, the disciples of the entire heavenly yin-yang sect were divided into the following categories: prospective chosen, personal disciples, core disciples, and ordinary disciples. Amongst them, the cultivations of quasi-saints were usually at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm or above. On the other hand, personal disciples range from the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm to the Tao Emperor realm. As for core disciples, practically all of them possess cultivations at the Tao Emperor realm, while ordinary disciples were below the Tao Emperor realm. So, there weren't many disciples at the Tao Emperor realm in the heavenly yin-yang sect, but there were definitely quite a few as well. After all, the numbers were there for all to see. The entire heavenly yin-yang sect definitely had 1,000,000 disciples. As for the 100+ disciples from the main branch, besides the prospective chosen, there were merely 7 or 8 personal disciples, and practically all the others were core disciples. It was precisely because of this that even though their group seemed to be huge, they were basically no threat to the members of the Sacred Palace. As soon as the battle erupted, the situation became one-sided. Numerous disciples from the main branch were heavily injured by the members of the Sacred Palace, and they couldn't get up from the ground. The prospective chosen was completely dazed as he gazed at the situation before him that was completely different from what he'd imagined. How is this possible? The Sacred Palace only has a little over a dozen people, so where did they get such formidable combat strength from? He was shocked in his heart. Moreover, Through the observation of the prospective chosen, he noticed to his surprise that not a single person from the sacred palace was below the Tao Emperor realm. It was even to the extent that Gudu Wuya, Ouyang Roshue, and Huangfu Ao's cultivations were at the entry level of the Tao Emperor realm. Exactly what kind of monstrous genius was this? The prospective chosen was completely dazed, and his heart was in a mess. Long Qing smiled coldly as he similarly sensed the prospective chosen's absent-mindedness. You dare to get distracted while fighting me? You're courting death. As he spoke, Long Qing suddenly punched out, and the roar of a dragon resounded. Only when he sensed the lethal threat from Long Qing's fist did the prospective chosen instantly return to his senses. He wanted to block it at the first possible moment, but he'd forgotten everything. Long Qing easily blasted his defenses apart, and then his fist struck his chest. A large mouthful of blood sprayed from his mouth, and the robust prospective chosen was immediately blasted away before crashing heavily to the ground. He was clearly heavily injured and didn't continue to attack. Long Qing stood on the spot and looked at the prospective chosen from afar with a disdainful expression. Even an ant like you dares to act so fiercely and spout such nonsense. Huh. As soon as he finished speaking, Long Qing didn't wait for the prospective chosen to reply. He directly turned around and walked toward Xiao Chun without even sparing a glance at the latter. Begging for your collection, begging for your monthly votes, begging for your recommendation. Chapter 1297. In this battle, the Sacred Palace faction had easily defeated the 100+ disciples of the main faction. After being heavily injured by Long Qing's punch, the leading candidate stared blankly. Even now, he still couldn't believe that the Sacred Palace faction was so strong. Although they were few in number, each one of them possessed heaven-defying strength. He had completely underestimated the Sacred Palace faction and had paid a heavy price for it. The Sacred Palace faction had severely injured his team of over 100 people. Although not a single one of them had been killed, every single one of them had sustained serious injuries. With such serious injuries, even with the help of medicinal pills, it would take at least 1 to 2 months for them to fully recover. As a result, their trip to the Heavenly Een Valley was cut off. This was because everyone in this group would have to find a place to recuperate for the rest of their time. At the same time, Xiao Chun had also finished collecting the dozens of Een Wind stones under the ancient tree. However, when Long Qing and the others came to Xiao Chun's side, Xiao Chun put away the last Een Wind stone into his storage ring and smiled at everyone. Not bad. Everyone smiled when they heard Xiao Chun's words. After chatting with the crowd for a while, Xiao Chun turned his head to look at the hundreds of main bloodline disciples who were groaning on the ground. They had all been seriously injured. A hint of a smile flashed in Xiao Chun's eyes. He walked up to the leading candidate and looked down at him from above. Facing Xiao Chun, the prospective Holy Son felt a burning pain in his chest, which was caused by Long Qing's punch. However, at this time, the prospective Holy Son still held on and snorted coldly. Xiao Chun, don't be too smug. You won't have a good ending after offending senior brother by Chiron. Someone will come to deal with you soon. Oh, is it by Qiuyue or Zhu Mujue? Xiao Chun chuckled nonchalantly. He wasn't afraid of Bai Qiuyue and the others. On the contrary, even if Bai Qiuyue didn't come, Xiao Chun would take the initiative to find him. With a smile, Xiao Chun paused for a moment before continuing. Tell Bai Qiuyue that I'll be waiting for him. Xiao Chun didn't kill the candidate. Although he was Bai Chiron's lackey, he had no interest in killing him. Everything had been caused by Bai Chiron, so as long as he dealt with him, nothing else would exist. Moreover, would the main branch disciples who once followed Bai Chiron still follow him? After asking the candidate to pass on a message to Bai Qiuyue, Xiao Chun led the Sacred Palace group away and left at a leisurely pace. Watching the departing figures of Xiao Chun and the others, a look of confusion appeared on the prospective chosen one's face. The faction of the Sacred Palace was too mysterious, especially since each of them could be said to have unique skills. Did such a faction really come from the barren land of the North Star realm? Bewilderment flashed across his heart. However, This tormenting bewilderment was quickly replaced by confidence. He had indeed underestimated the Sacred Palace faction's strength. But so what? No matter how strong the Sacred Palace faction was, could they be stronger than the main branch? Moreover, Bai Qiuyue had even persuaded Zhu Mujue to deal with Xiao Chun. With Zhu Mujue's strength and Bai Qiuyue's plan, they would definitely be able to take down the Sacred Palace faction. He had absolute confidence in the main branch. After all, it was the most powerful faction in the Heavenly Yin Sun sect. How could a foreign faction like the Sacred Palace contend against it? It was as if he could already see the scene of Xiao Chun being killed by Qiuyue. Not long after Xiao Chun and the others from the Sacred Palace left, another group of disciples from the main branch arrived. However, after seeing that all of them had been seriously injured, the group of disciples immediately sent the news to Bai Qiuyue. One had to admit that the main branch did indeed have the capital to be arrogant, which was vividly reflected in the number of people they had. The various factions had sent disciples into the Heavenly Yin Valley, but the main branch had the most people, numbering over 1,000. With such a large number of people, even if the first battalion disciples who followed Yin Kanyo were excluded, Bai Qiuyue still had nearly 700 disciples under her. Of course, this included the neutral faction like Zhu Mujue. However, Zhu Mujue and the other neutral faction disciples also obeyed Bai Qiuyue's orders. This was something Zhu Mujue himself had agreed to because he owed Bai Qiuyue a favor. After receiving the news, Bai Qiuyue soon arrived with a group of more than 400 main branch disciples. Among them, Zhu Mujue naturally followed by Bai Qiuyue's side. When Bai Qiuyue arrived, she approached the candidate saint with a warm smile on her face as she faced the group of heavily injured disciples from the main faction. Junior Brother Chun, how are your injuries? Are they serious? I have a saint-grade pill here. Junior Brother, please take it. She didn't question or blame him at all. On the contrary, Bai Qiuyue revealed a wisp of deep concern. Moreover, she even took out a divine-grade medicinal pill and fed it to this prospective holy son to heal his injuries. The candidate was touched by Bai Qiuyue's concern, but he didn't accept the medicinal pill. Instead, he said with a look of self-blame, "Your junior brother is incompetent. Please punish me, senior brother." It had to be said that Bai Qiuyue really had a way of winning people's hearts. With his actions, the 100 or so disciples who had been seriously injured by the Sacred Palace faction were all moved. At the same time, their hatred for the Sacred Palace faction surged in their hearts. He was completely different from her brother, Bai Qiron. After pacifying him and personally feeding him a pill, Bai Qiuyue asked about the Holy Palace's faction. "Senior brother, we've underestimated the Sacred Palace's forces. The Sacred Palace's forces are very strong. Even though there's only a little over 10 of them, not a single one of them is below the Tao Emperor realm." The prospective Holy Son told Bai Qiuyue everything that had happened, and he even sighed in the end. How is Xiao Chen's cultivation? Bai Qiuyue wasn't interested in the others, but she attached great importance to Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun didn't make a move. The candidate replied truthfully. Xiao Chun hadn't made a move, but according to everyone's guess, Xiao Chun shouldn't have broken through. After all, only a short while had passed, so how could Xiao Chun have broken through so quickly? Of course, Bai Qiuyue definitely hadn't imagined that Xiao Chun and the others had found a stone culvert and relied on it to successfully break through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor's stage. Bai Qiuyue's expression didn't change at all because of the Sacred Palace's strength. She revealed a faint smile and said, "It's fine. No matter how strong they are, there are only a dozen of them. My main bloodline has 100 people. Could it be that we can't take down a few clowns like them? Begging to be collected, begging to be recommended." Chapter 1298. As she spoke, killing intent flashed through Bai Qiuyue's eyes. She gently patted the chosen holy son's shoulder and instructed him to pay attention to his rest. In the end, Bai Qiuyue even specially left behind 20 disciples from the main branch to take care of and protect them. After all, over 100 people were already heavily injured. Toward Bai Qiuyue's actions, The 100 disciples were naturally moved to tears, and Bai Qiuyue responded to them with a smile. One had to admit that Bai Qiuyue was much better than Bai Qiran. If it weren't for Bai Qiran's extraordinary talent that made her a chosen on the saint ranking, Bai Qiuyue would have completely crushed her. Even so, Bai Qiran's faction was basically developed by Bai Qiuyue and had nothing to do with Bai Qiran. Most of the time, Bai Qiran was just a symbol of her status as a chosen on the saint ranking. After settling the matter here, Bai Qiuyue stood up. He paused for a moment when he arrived beside Zhu Mujue and patted him on the shoulder with a smile. "Senior brother Zhu, I'll be counting on you this time. Don't worry, I won't fail as long as Lin Yao doesn't stop me. However, once this matter is over, we'll write off our previous grudge." Zhu Mujue nonchalantly said, "Don't worry. Although I, your junior, am not some indomitable hero, I can still keep my word." Hearing that, Bai Qiuyue lightly smiled and said. After saying that, Bai Qiuyue and Zhu Mujue brushed past each other and gazed into the distance. "Xiao Chun, the number of people is too small. This will always be the weakness of your sacred palace. Even if everyone in your sacred palace has extraordinary battle prowess, there are still only a dozen or so people." Bai Qiuyue had long seen through the sacred palace faction's weakness, which was their foundation in numbers. Moreover, Bai Qiuyue clearly understood the sacred palace faction better than the others. After all, Bai Qiran had interacted with Chun Ling, Long Qing, and Chen Yu before and knew that the three of them weren't ordinary individuals. Bai Qiuyue naturally knew this as well. Therefore, Bai Qiuyue didn't find it strange at all that the Sacred Palace faction could completely crush the 100 or so main faction disciples. In his opinion, this was a very normal thing. But so what? Bai Qiuyue's target was only Xiao Chun. As long as she could delay the rest of the Sacred Palace faction and then let Zhu Mujue take action, what could the Sacred Palace faction do? The only problem now was how to seal off the Sacred Palace faction's escape route. After all, the Sacred Palace faction was very small, with only a dozen or so people. There were advantages and disadvantages to having a small number of people. When encountering a large group, such as the hundreds of people from the main bloodline, it was naturally impossible to face them head-on. This was a disadvantage. On the other hand, the advantage was that it was easy to shift. With so few people, if they couldn't defeat the enemy, they could just turn around and leave. They could just hide in a remote forest. At that time, it wouldn't be easy for Bai Qiuyue to find Xiao Chun and the others. If they couldn't win, they could run. This was the current advantage of the Sacred Palace faction. In addition, each member of the Sacred Palace faction had extraordinary combat strength, which made it even more difficult to catch them. Therefore, the most important problem for Bai Qiuyue now was how to stop Xiao Chun and the others from escaping, how to seal off their escape route, and then catch them like a turtle in a jar. With that thought in mind, Bai Qiuyue found a quiet place and took out a map from her storage ring. The map wasn't just some random place, it was a map of the Heavenly Yin Valley. Foundations were often revealed at times like this. The main bloodline was very powerful, and under the efforts of generations of disciples, the main bloodline had long explored the entire Heavenly Yin Valley. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that Bai Qiuyue had a map of the Heavenly Yin Valley. Bai Qiuyue's eyes were fixed on the map, and in the end, her gaze locked onto a long and narrow valley not far from here. The valley didn't have a name, but from the map, it was very narrow, with towering mountain ranges on both sides. As long as they entered the valley, it would be easy to seal it off. After staring at the valley for a long while, Bai Qiuyue came up with a plan in her heart. Her eyes were full of confidence as she fixed her gaze on the valley. Bai Qiuyue smiled faintly. "Xiao Chun, this will be your burial ground." The valley was very suitable for encirclement. As long as they forced Xiao Chun and the others into the valley, Bai Qiuyue's main bloodline disciples would block the two exits and occupy the two mountain peaks on both sides. At that time, Xiao Chun and the others would be like turtles in a jar. At that time, the disciples of the main branch would hold back the people of the Sacred Palace, while Zhu Mujue would kill Xiao Chun. Then, everything would be a success. Bai Qiuyue had nearly 500 disciples under her command, including nearly 20 chosen. Bai Qiuyue didn't believe that such a force wouldn't be enough to pin down the Sacred Palace disciples. Thinking of this, Bai Qiuyue immediately called over the dozen chosen and ordered them to immediately begin searching for the Sacred Palace disciples. Once they found them, there was no need to continue attacking. Instead, they would find a way to drive them into the valley Bai Qiuyue had chosen. The dozen chosen nodded in response when they heard Bai Qiuyue's order. After that, the nearly 500 disciples under Bai Qiuyue's command split into over a dozen teams and began to encircle and annihilate the Sacred Palace disciples. Xiao Chun was unaware of Bai Qiuyue's plan, and he didn't have a map of the Heavenly Yin Valley. After Xiao Chun and the others left, Xiao Chun was also thinking about how to deal with Bai Qiuyue. It was definitely impossible to fight them head-on because the difference in numbers was too great. Even if the Sacred Palace disciples possessed great combat strength, it was impossible for a dozen or so of them to kill a few hundred disciples from the main bloodline. Moreover, the main bloodline disciples weren't all good-for-nothings. The chosen weren't weak at all. Even if they might not be a match for the Sacred Palace disciples in a one-on-one battle, what if it was 2-on-1 or 3-on-1? The only advantage Xiao Chun had right now was that Bai Qiuyue didn't know that he had broken through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. If he used this advantage well, he might be able to catch Bai Qiuyue by surprise. Since he didn't have any good ideas, Xiao Chun quickly changed his way of thinking. He stood in Bai Qiuyue's shoes and thought about how he would deal with the Sacred Palace disciples if he was in Bai Qiuyue's shoes. After changing his way of thinking, Xiao Chun quickly realized two things. The first was that Bai Qiuyue would definitely take the initiative to attack, because it was impossible for Bai Qiuyue to allow him to spend half a year peacefully in the Heavenly Yin Valley. Perhaps Bai Qiuyue had already made a move. After all, their whereabouts had been exposed. The second was what Bai Qiuyue was most afraid of. There is no doubt that Bai Qiuyue wasn't afraid of a head-on battle with the Sacred Palace disciples, but the Sacred Palace disciples fleeing. Because once Xiao Chun and the others chose to flee, it would be very difficult for Bai Qiuyue to capture them. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1299. What Bai Qiuyue feared the most was that the Sacred Palace faction would fight and retreat at the same time. After all, the Sacred Palace faction didn't have many people to begin with, and all of them were monstrous geniuses. None of them were weak. In that case, the Sacred Palace faction would be able to fight like ghosts, and Bai Qiuyue would have a hard time catching them. There was only one way for Bai Qiuyue to successfully capture the Sacred Palace faction, and that was to surround them and cut off all their escape routes. Bai Qiuyue would definitely use the method of encirclement. Thinking of this, Xiao Chun suddenly had an extremely risky idea, and that was to kill his way back and take the initiative to attack Bai Qiuyue. If Bai Qiuyue wanted to surround them, he would definitely send out the majority of the main faction disciples. As such, the defensive force around Bai Qiuyue would be the weakest. According to Xiao Chun's estimation, Bai Qiuyue would at most leave Zhu Mujue by his side. As for the others, he would definitely be sent out to search for them. It had to be said that Xiao Chun's guess was completely correct. At this moment, Bai Qiuyue indeed only had Zhu Mujue and nearly 100 main faction disciples by his side. As for the others, they had naturally been sent out by Bai Qiuyue to search for the Sacred Palace faction. Bai Qiuyue's idea was to force the Sacred Palace faction into the valley and then launch a fatal attack there. However, he had clearly neglected one point, and that was that Bai Qiuyue's own defense would be very weak. This was because there were almost no other experts around him besides Zhu Mujue, and Bai Qiuyue's own strength was not considered strong. If Xiao Chun led the Sacred Palace faction to attack Bai Qiuyue at this time, the consequences were obvious. Zhu Mujue and nearly 100 main faction disciples were obviously unable to guarantee Bai Qiuyue's safety. Bai Qiuyue had neglected this point, or rather, he had never believed that Xiao Chun would dare to take the initiative to attack him, because wouldn't that be tantamount to walking right into a trap? Although the Sacred Palace faction was full of monsters, there were too few of them after all. If they wanted to fight the main faction head-on, they would definitely lose. So why would Xiao Chun take the initiative to come after him? It was precisely because of this that Bai Qiuyue had never considered the issue of her own safety. In other words, Bai Qiuyue had never thought that the Sacred Palace would dare to take the initiative to attack. He had overlooked this point, and this gave Xiao Chun an opportunity. Moreover, when faced with such an opportunity, others might hesitate and be afraid of walking into a trap, but Xiao Chun was not afraid. Or perhaps it could be said that Xiao Chun was a restless person. Since this was an opportunity, Xiao Chun was definitely not willing to miss it. It was completely worth the risk. As long as he killed Bai Qiuyu, would the main branch still be in the mood to hunt him down? Obviously, there was none. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. This was the logic. With this thought in mind, Xiao Chen told Chen Ling, Long Qing, and the others his idea. When they heard Xiao Chen's plan, everyone was stunned at first, but they quickly agreed that it was feasible. There were more than a dozen people from the Holy Palace. None of them objected to Xiao Chen's plan after hearing it. They all felt that it was feasible and worth the risk. Therefore, it was said that one lunatic was not scary, but if a group of lunatics gathered together, it would definitely be a terrifying thing. The Holy Palace was obviously like that. Although they were few in number, each one of them was braver than the last. Everyone supported Xiao Chen's plan. After a simple discussion, Xiao Chen decided to take the risk and give it a try. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Big brother, second sister, the two of you go find a disciple from the main faction and ask him about Bai Qiuyue's current location. Xiao Chen said as he looked at Chun Ling and Long Qing. The first thing was to determine Bai Qiuyue's current location. However, this was not difficult. They could just grab any one of the several hundred disciples from the main faction and ask him. When they heard Xiao Chen's words, Chun Ling and Long Qing did not hesitate. They immediately nodded and turned to leave. With Chun Ling and Long Qing taking action, it was not difficult to capture a disciple from the main faction. Therefore, after the two left, Xiao Chun led everyone to find a secluded place to hide and wait for the two to return. They did not have to wait for long. Bai Qiuyue had divided the main faction disciples into more than 10 teams and sent them to encircle the Sacred Palace faction. As a result, Chun Ling and Long Qing easily encountered a group of main faction disciples. However, according to Xiao Chen's instructions, the two did not act rashly and alert the enemy. Instead, they found an opportunity and secretly captured a main faction disciple without alerting anyone else. When Chun and Ling returned, Xiao Chen knew that Bai Qiuyue had indeed sent out all her disciples to surround and annihilate them. A cold smile appeared on his face as he walked up to the main branch disciple and asked in an indifferent voice, "Is there anyone who can help? Where is Bai Qiuyue now?" This disciple was only an ordinary disciple and did not have a high status in the main faction. Therefore, Xiao Chun did not ask Bai Qiuyue about her plans. He believed that this person would not know. He only asked about Bai Qiuyue's current location. As for the rest, Xiao Chun was not interested and this disciple would not know. In the face of Xiao Chen's inquiry, this disciple did not have any intention of cooperating at first. However, after a beating, this disciple became much more obedient and quickly sold Bai Qiuyue out. I don't know where Senior Brother Bai is right now, but when we left, Senior Brother Bai was there. After learning that Bai Qiuyue was near the ancient tree from before, Xiao Chun revealed a cold smile. It seemed that Bai Qiuyue really treated the Sacred Palace faction as prey. He had never considered his own safety and actually dared to stay in the same place. However, Bai Qiuyue clearly did not know that the position of prey and hunter could be switched. Just like now, he had sent all his disciples to encircle Xiao Chen's group. Little did he know that Xiao Chun was thinking of a way to kill him in one blow. He was going to kill Bai Qiuyue first. A glint flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. Then he struck the back of the disciple's neck and directly knocked him out. He did not kill him. To Xiao Chun, this disciple had no enmity with him, so it did not matter whether he killed him or not. Knocking him out was enough. After obtaining the answer he wanted, Xiao Chun looked at the crowd and smiled. Let's go and say hello to Bai Qiuyue. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone sneered. Then, the group turned around and rushed towards the ancient tree from before. Bai Qiuyue obviously did not expect Xiao Chen's group to turn around and come back. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1300. Bai Qiuyue was sitting alone under the ancient tree, her eyes still fixed on the map in her hands. Even now, she was still thinking about how to force the Sacred Palace faction into the valley. She didn't even think about her own safety. Beside Bai Qiuyue, Zhu Mujue sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, clearly unconcerned about these matters. To Zhu Mujue, there was no enmity between him and Xiao Chun, so whether or not he could kill Xiao Chun did not matter much to him. Everything was just because he owed Bai Qiuyue a favor and was here to repay it. Therefore, Zhu Mujue's idea was very simple. If Xiao Chun came, he would take action. If he didn't, then forget it. In any case, it wouldn't affect him. Ignoring Zhu Mujue, Bai Qiuyue was waiting for news from Xiao Chun and the others. As long as Xiao Chun and the others were forced into the valley, Bai Qiuyue had full confidence that she could kill Xiao Chun in one fell swoop. She was full of confidence, but Bai Qiuyue obviously didn't expect that the position of the hunter and the prey had quietly changed. The Sacred Palace faction, which should have been like a turtle in a jar, was now secretly moving towards her under the lead of Xiao Chun. Bai Qiuyue wanted to catch a turtle in a jar, but Xiao Chun wanted to take drastic measures. Soon, more than an hour passed, and Xiao Chun and the others were less than 10 miles away from the ancient tree. Xiao Chun and the others had done their best to conceal their whereabouts along the way, so the main faction disciples under Bai Qiuyue didn't discover Xiao Chun and the others' whereabouts at all. Even when they knew that Xiao Chun and the others were less than 10 miles away from Bai Qiuyue, no one discovered them. They were already very close to the ancient tree, and Xiao Chun could even vaguely sense the dozens of faint spirit power fluctuations. With the speed of Xiao Chun and the others, they would be able to reach Bai Qiuyue in a single charge. At this time, Xiao Chun gave up on the idea of continuing to hide, because if he continued to approach, it would be impossible to do so. Once he got close, Bai Qiuyue and the others would definitely discover him. Moreover, Zhu Mujue was by Bai Qiuyue's side. That person wasn't some weakling. Big brother, second sister, senior brother Chun, later on, the three of you will deal with Zhu Mujue. As long as you can delay him, the others will deal with the remaining disciples of the main faction. As for me, I will kill Bai Qiuyue as soon as possible. Xiao Chun whispered to everyone as he prepared to launch a surprise attack. They had to end this battle quickly. Otherwise, if the main branch's disciples surrounded them, it would be troublesome to escape. Their goal was very clear, and that was to kill Bai Qiuyue. As for Zhu Mujue and the other main branch's disciples, Xiao Chun didn't care about their lives. He only wanted to kill Bai Qiuyue. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone nodded in agreement. Seeing this, a cold light flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes as he coldly said, "Remember, this battle has to be ended quickly. Let's go." After speaking, Xiao Chun took the lead and moved. He no longer cared about exposing his aura as he directly turned into a sword light and rushed towards Bai Qiuyue's direction. Xiao Chen's spirit power soared into the sky. At the same time, Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chun Yu, and the others also followed closely behind. In an instant, the aura of the Sacred Palace faction erupted. Just as Xiao Chun and the others fully unleashed their aura and rushed towards Bai Qiuyue at full speed, Zhu Mujue, who had been meditating with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He looked in the direction of Xiao Chun and the others and said with a solemn expression, "Bai Qiuyue, trouble is coming." Zhu Mujue was the strongest among them, so he was naturally the first to sense the aura of Xiao Chen's group. As soon as Zhu Mujue's voice sounded, Bai Qiuyue, who was still thinking about his plan, said in disbelief with a sunken expression, "Xiao Chun." He also sensed a dozen terrifying auras rushing towards him. Bai Qiuyue immediately knew that the owners of these auras were definitely from the Sacred Palace faction. He was shocked and furious at the same time. Bai Qiuyue really didn't expect that Xiao Qian would actually take the initiative to bring people to him. Bai Qiuyue was very confident in his assassination plan. But at this moment, Xiao Qian's drastic measures caught Bai Qiuyue off guard. He naturally knew that the strength by his side wasn't enough to contend against the Sacred Palace faction. He had already sent out all the experts under him, so it could be said that Bai Qiuyue's defense was extremely weak. Therefore, Xiao Qian's group would definitely bring fatal danger to him. Bai Qiuyue gnashed his teeth. No matter how meticulous Bai Qiuyue's plan was, there was still a flaw. However, there was no time for him to think too much. The distance of less than 10 miles was almost instantly covered by Xiao Qian's group. While Bai Qiuyue was still speaking coldly, Xiao Qian and the others had already appeared in front of her. From the horizon, more than a dozen figures flew through the air. Without saying anything, they immediately launched an attack on the nearly 100 main branch disciples around Bai Qiuyue. Bai Qiuyue, run if you can. I can't stop so many of them. Zhu Mujue took a step forward and stood in front of Bai Qiuyue when he saw that Xiao Qian's group had already arrived. Tian Yue, Qin Shiro, Fairy of 100 Flowers, Emperor Qing, and the others were already engaged in a fierce battle with the disciples of the main lineage. Xiao Chun, Cheng Long, Long Qing, and Chen Yu, on the other hand, were rushing towards Bai Qiuyue and Zhu Mujue. Although Zhu Mujue hadn't fought with Xiao Qian's group before, he didn't think that he could contend with Xiao Qian's group alone. Therefore, Zhu Mujue immediately told Bai Qiuyue to run. However, although he said so, Zhu Mujue didn't think that Bai Qiuyue had any chance of escaping. After all, the enemy was already right in front of him. Indeed, he didn't give Bai Qiuyue any chance to escape. Xiao Qian was also very clear that this was his only chance to kill Bai Qiuyue. If he couldn't kill Bai Qiuyue this time, he definitely wouldn't have such an opportunity in the future. This was because with Bai Qiuyue's character, she would definitely not suffer a second time after suffering a loss once. According to the previous agreement, Chun Ling, Long Qing, and Chun Yu didn't wait for Zhu Mujue to make a move. The three of them took the initiative to find Zhu Mujue and joined forces to fight him. Chun Ling and the other two joined forces to hold Zhu Mujue back. Zhu Mujue naturally knew the intention of Xiao Qian's group, but he had no choice but to fight with all his might. The surrounding main branch disciples were all held back, and Xiao Qian didn't have any obstructions to face Bai Qiuyue. Facing Bai Qiuyue, Xiao Qian's eyes were overflowing with killing intent as he coldly said, "Bai Qiuyue, it seems like you won't be able to escape today." Chapter 1301. Bai Qiuyue, looks like you won't be able to escape today. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Qian didn't even wait for Bai Qiuyue to reply before he suddenly slashed with the dustless sword in hand. He had no intention of wasting his breath on Bai Qiuyue at all. Bai Qiuyue felt his hairs stand on end when he faced Xiao Qian's attack, and he cried out in disbelief. "You've broken through?" He'd always thought that Xiao Qian's cultivation was at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. But who would have imagined that Xiao Qian had broken through a long time ago and attained perfection of the Tao Emperor realm? Originally, Bai Qiuyue was confident that he could fight Xiao Qian for a while. After all, even though Bai Qiuyue's natural talent in cultivation wasn't good, his natural talent could absolutely be considered to be above average when compared to his older brother Bai Qiran. Otherwise, how could he have become a candidate of the heavenly yin-yang sect? Unfortunately, Xiao Qian's cultivation had broken through, so Bai Qiuyue was absolutely incapable of fighting him. It was even to the extent that fleeing had become an extravagant hope. Zhu Mujue had a solemn expression on his face when he sensed Xiao Qian's terrifying aura. He was already under great pressure from Chun Ling's group of three, and he'd never imagined that they would be so strong. At this moment, when he sensed Xiao Qian's aura at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, Zhu Mujue was certain that Bai Qiuyue would definitely die today. He wouldn't be able to hold on until the main branch arrived to rescue him. He felt slightly bitter in his heart. At the same time, a wisp of curiosity towards the sacred palace's branch had arisen in his heart. He'd originally thought that he hadn't underestimated anyone, but reality proved that he'd still underestimated the sacred palace's branch. Just like this very moment, Zhu Mujue originally thought that he could fight Chun Ling's group of 3, and he should even be able to occupy an advantage. However, reality was completely different. Zhu Mujue wasn't able to gain the slightest advantage against them. Their joint forces were completely sufficient to suppress Zhu Mujue. It was even to the extent that Zhu Mujue determined that his chances of defeat were at least 90% if the battle continued. Chun Ling and the other 2 all possessed strength that was at least comparable to the top 10 Holy Sons. This absolutely exceeded Zhu Mujue's expectations. He couldn't even take care of himself, so he naturally didn't have time to worry about Bai Qiuyue. On the other side, Bai Qiuyue was struck in the chest by Xiao Chen's sword after just a few moves. She was injured quite badly. Bai Qiuyue didn't even last 10 moves before being severely injured by Xiao Chun. No one had expected such an outcome. Bai Qiuyue's hair stood on end. While blocking Xiao Chen's attacks, she shouted in a deep voice, "Xiao Chun, you can't kill me. If you kill me, the Taiyang sect won't let you off." This again, using the Heavenly Yin Sun sect to threaten me. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's attack didn't slow down at all, and he sneered. Is there any point in talking about this now? Using the Taiyang sect as an example now, but was it useful? Not to mention whether the Taiyang sect would pursue the matter. Even if they did, Xiao Chun had to kill Bai Qiuyue today. This was the Heavenly Yin Valley, and the Taiyang sect's upper echelons couldn't do anything even if they wanted to. As he spoke, Xiao Chun directly pointed his finger and executed the fish intestine sword finger, leaving Bai Qiuyue no way out. However, just as Xiao Chun was about to deal the killing blow, Zhu Mujue suddenly shouted from not far away. While fighting fiercely with Chun Ling and the other 2, he shouted Xiao Chun, you can't kill Bai Qiuyue. He's a disciple of the Bai clan. Killing him will only bring trouble to your sacred palace. Listen to me, spare his life, and there's still room for negotiation. I can guarantee that I won't hunt you down in the Heavenly Yin Valley again. Zhu Mujue, indeed, didn't have a good impression of Bai Qiuyue, but seeing that Bai Qiuyue was about to be killed, he couldn't remain indifferent. After all, once Bai Qiuyue died, the matter would become serious. Moreover, with Bai Qiuran's character, there was no way she would let Zhu Mujue go. Zhu Mujue's voice was very loud. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's hand movements paused slightly. Seeing this, Zhu Mujue was overjoyed, thinking that he had persuaded Xiao Chun. Without further thought, he hurriedly said, Xiao Chun, calm down. We're all fellow disciples of the same sect. What's there that can't be discussed properly? I guarantee that I won't let Bai Qiuyue attack you again. Don't bring trouble to the sacred palace for nothing. The Bai clan is very strong. Zhu Mujue thought that Xiao Chun had taken his words to heart. But who would have thought that just as Zhu Mujue finished speaking and Bai Qiuyue thought that she was lucky enough to survive and secretly let out a sigh of relief, Xiao Chun, who had originally stopped moving, pointed at the air and directly used the fish intestine sword finger. A blood-red sword ray rushed toward Bai Qiuyue like lightning and then accurately pierced through Bai Qiuyue's forehead between her eyebrows. Bai Qiuyue's eyes were wide open. Even in death, he probably never imagined that Xiao Chun had no intention of letting him go. He didn't listen to Zhu Mujue's words and didn't hesitate at all. The reason why Xiao Chun paused was to make Bai Qiuyue lower her guard. That way, it would be easier for him to kill her and save him the trouble of wasting more effort. Zhu Mujue was stunned for a moment when he saw Xiao Chun kill Bai Qiuyue with a single finger. Then, he roared and punched out with both fists, forcing Chun Ling and the other 2 to retreat. He turned and glared at Xiao Chun. At the same time, there was a trace of disbelief and shock on his face. He couldn't understand why Xiao Chun could kill Bai Qiuyue so unscrupulously. Didn't he know the consequences of killing Bai Qiuyue? Xiao Chun showed no fear in the face of the furious Zhu Mujue. The two looked at each other, and Xiao Chun said indifferently, "By Qiu Yue and by Chiron must die. There's no room for negotiation between us. Also, although my sacred palace is an outsider, we don't fear any enemy. No matter what happens to the Bai family, Bai Chiron and his brother must die. As long as I, Xiao Chun, am alive, I will not let those two brothers go." "But do you still want to fight?" There was naturally no room for negotiation between Xiao Chun and Bai Chiron. It wasn't that the two brothers weren't willing, but Xiao Chun wasn't. After what Bai Chiron had done, it was impossible for Xiao Chun and Bai Chiron to coexist peacefully. Only one of them could live. Killing Bai Chiron was something Xiao Chun was determined to do. At this moment, the stubbornness in Xiao Chun's bones was naturally on full display. Zhu Mujue finally understood when he heard Xiao Chun's words. It wasn't that Bai Chiron and his brother weren't willing to let go, but that Xiao Chun wasn't willing to let go. Zhu Mujue took a deep breath and said helplessly, "I'm not your match." Zhu Mujue's words were undoubtedly admitting defeat. Xiao Chun took a deep look at Zhu Mujue and said in a deep voice, "Let's go." Following Xiao Chun's order, the Sacred Palace group quickly disappeared into the horizon. Zhu Mujue didn't give chase and only quietly watched as the Sacred Palace group drifted away, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1302. The main reason Xiao Chun didn't kill Zhu Mujue was because he wasn't confident. This didn't mean that Xiao Chun and the other three couldn't kill Zhu Mujue, but that Xiao Chun wasn't confident that he could kill Zhu Mujue in a short time. As early as when everyone had just appeared, the disciples of the main branch had already sent out a distress signal. Presumably, the people of the main branch would soon arrive, and before they arrived, Xiao Chun did not have absolute confidence in killing Zhu Mujue. Without absolute confidence, acting rashly could very well lead to being surrounded. In addition, Zhu Mujue wasn't their target this time, and Bai Qiuyue had already successfully killed him. As such, there was no need to put himself in danger for Zhu Mujue. Moreover, Zhu Mujue had already admitted defeat, so it didn't matter whether he was killed or not. After watching Xiao Chun's group leave, Zhu Mujue walked over to Bai Qiuyue's corpse. He looked down at Bai Qiuyue's corpse from above and exhaled a turbid breath. He could already imagine what kind of huge waves would rise in the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect after the Heavenly Yin Valley trial. While Zhu Mujue was feeling emotional, the first group of main faction disciples hurried over. However, they were clearly a step too late. By the time they arrived, Xiao Chun's group had already left. They also stared at Bai Qiuyu's body in shock. Not long after, groups of disciples from the main faction hurried back. The dozen or so candidates from the main faction, like Zhu Mujue, were currently gathered around Bai Qiuyu's body in silence. She was already dead, so there was no point in saying anything. After a long while, someone finally broke the silence. "What do we do now?" "Don't provoke the Sacred Palace faction for now. Let senior brother Bai Chiron make his own decision after we leave the Heavenly Eagle Valley." Now that Bai Qiuyue was dead, their plan to kill Xiao Chun in the Heavenly Yin Valley had obviously failed. Moreover, the Sacred Palace faction had proven that they were not pushovers. If this continued, they would suffer even more casualties. Therefore, it was best to wait until they left the Heavenly Yin Valley and wait for Bai Chiron to make her own decisions. None of the candidates objected to this suggestion. To be honest, they had no intention of continuing to hunt down the Sacred Palace faction. After keeping Bai Qiuyue's corpse, Zhu Mujue spoke up indifferently. "Since Bai Qiuyue is dead, I shall take my leave. Farewell, everyone." He had no intention of getting involved with Bai Chiron's group any longer. Since Bai Qiuyue was dead, then the debt of gratitude from before was naturally written off. Although the crowd was displeased by Zhu Mujue's words, they did not say anything. After all, Zhu Mujue was not a member of Bai Chiron's faction. Now that he wanted to leave, they could not stop him. Without any hesitation, Zhu Mujue turned around and left as soon as he finished speaking. At the same time, 20 to 30 disciples from the main faction also left behind Zhu Mujue. Watching Zhu Mujue's departing figure, one of the candidates sighed softly. Sigh, it seems that things have really gotten out of hand this time. One could imagine what kind of shock by Qiuyue's death would bring to the righteous Yin Yang sect. Although they had anticipated the future, no one would have thought that at this moment, in a city unknown distance away from the righteous Yin Yang sect. This city was called White Moon City, and it was the city where the Bai clan resided. White Moon City was very large, and at the center of the city was a magnificent mansion. This was where the Bai clan resided. At this moment, the main hall of the Bai clan was filled with Saint Realm experts. There were dozens of them, and among them were 3 quasi-saint great sovereigns. These people were all experts of the Bai clan. At the center of the hall, a guard knelt on the ground in horror. Seeing this, one of the quasi-saint great sovereigns on the main seat shouted, "What did you say just now? Repeat it for everyone present." Lord, it's Second Young Master's. Second Young Master's life talisman. It's burned. Faced with this question, the guard's forehead was drenched in cold sweat as he stammered. A life talisman was a type of talisman unique to the Central World. After refining it, it could record the condition of a person's body. If the person was injured, the talisman would begin to burn. The more it burned, the more serious the injury would be. If the entire talisman was burned, there was only one possibility. The person had died. In the Central World, all major factions would refine life talismans for their core members. The Bai clan was naturally no exception. Just now, Bai Qiuyue's life talisman had been burned. Everyone present knew what this meant. Hearing this, the experts of the Bai clan were shocked. The quasi-saint great sovereign who had spoken just now was the current head of the Bai clan, the father of the 2 brothers, Bai Qiran and Bai Qiuyue. His name was Bai Mushuang. With the death of his son, Bai Mushuang's expression had turned extremely gloomy. He swept his gaze across the crowd, and then, without any sign, he shot forth a palm strike. Before everyone's eyes, he directly killed the kneeling guard. He was smashed into a pile of flesh and blood. Seeing Bai Mushuang attack, no one said anything. They knew that the guard's death was somewhat unjust. After all, he was only responsible for guarding the life talisman and had nothing to do with Bai Qiuyue's death. Bai Mushuang had only killed him to vent his anger. But so what? After killing the guard, Bai Mushuang coldly said to the middle-aged man on his left, "Second brother, I'm afraid you'll have to make a trip to the Yin Yang sect in person. No matter who it is, I'll make them pay the price for killing a member of the Bai clan." The middle-aged man was also a quasi-saint. He was Bai Mushuang's second brother and was called Bai Mulan. On the other side of Bai Mushuang was another middle-aged man. He was Bai Mushuang's third brother. The 3 brothers could be said to be the current pillars of the Bai clan. Of course, apart from the 3 of them, the Bai clan also had an ancestor. He was the father of the 3 brothers and the grandfather of Bai Qiran and Bai Qiuyue. However, because the Bai clan's ancestor was already advanced in age and the 3 brothers had already attained the quasi-saint realm, the Bai clan's ancestor had retreated behind the scenes many years ago and cultivated wholeheartedly. Most of the time, he only played a symbolic role with the intention of deterring the other great clans and powers. As for the specific matters of the Bai clan, it was all decided by Bai Mushuang and the other 2 brothers, and the Bai clan's ancestor never asked about it. Hearing his elder brother's words, killing intent flashed through Bai Mulan's eyes. He then said indifferently, "Don't worry, elder brother. I'll capture him personally and make him pay with his life for Qiuyue." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1303. Xiao Chen was naturally unaware of the Bai clan's reaction. Of course, even if Xiao Chen knew, he wouldn't care too much. He had already killed Bai Qiran, so what else could he do? He could only deal with whatever came his way. Moreover, Xiao Chen wasn't really afraid of the Bai clan, especially after he'd broken through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Moreover, how could Yin Yangzi allow the Bai clan to act recklessly in the Heavenly Yin sect? Moreover, it wouldn't be long before Xiao Chen would settle the score with Bai Qiran. At that time, As long as he killed Bai Qiran, Shao Chun would naturally be ranked on the hallowed rankings. Once he ascended the hallowed rankings, what could the Bai clan do to him with the protection of the will of the heavenly way? Could there be someone in the younger generation of the Bai clan who was stronger than Bai Qiran? Due to all these reasons, Shao Chun wasn't really afraid of the Bai clan. After killing Bai Qiuyue, Shao Chun and the others were indeed much more relaxed. At the very least, the disciples of the main branch didn't come looking for trouble with them. In this way, Shao Chun and the others could naturally spend more time searching for Inwen stones. No one disturbed them. 3 months passed very quickly. Coupled with the 1 month from before, it had been almost 5 months since the opening of the Heavenly Een Valley. There was only a little over a month left before the half-year deadline ended. During these 5 months, the disciples of the various factions who entered the Heavenly Een Valley could be said to be filled with joy and sorrow. Some had great gains, while others were extremely depressed. However, the situation in the Heavenly Een Valley was still relatively calm compared to the outside world. Especially after news of Shao Chun killing Bai Qiuyue had spread, the disciples of the various factions quickly calmed down after recovering from their initial shock. They didn't dare to take the initiative to look for trouble with the sacred palace. Of course, the conflicts between them had also become much more restrained because someone had died. Moreover, it was Bai Qiuyue who had died. It was obvious how much of a shock it was to the disciples of the various factions. The situation in the Heavenly Een Valley gradually stabilized. The disciples of the various sects also tried their best to stay out of each other's business. However, it was different in the outside world. Almost 5 months later, the experts of the Bai clan had arrived at the Taiyang sect under Bai Mulin's lead. Moreover, Bai Qiran knew about her brother's death in Heavenly Een Valley. Without the slightest doubt, Bai Qiran immediately locked on a Shao Chun of the sacred palace. Bai Qiran was filled with killing intent. Bai Qiran and her brother Bai Qiuyue were very close. She had already spread the word that once the matter at Heavenly Een Valley was settled, Bai Qiran would personally kill Shao Chun. The incident in the Heavenly Een Valley had spread like wildfire within the sect. Many disciples were waiting for the day when the Heavenly Een Valley would close. At that time, there would definitely be a huge commotion. However, compared to the Sacred Palace faction, many disciples were more optimistic about Bai Qiran. After all, Bai Qiran was a chosen on the saint ranking and had been famous in the Taiyang sect for a long time. On the other hand, the Sacred Palace faction was only a newcomer. The matter of Shao Chun and Bai Qiran had spread like wildfire within the sect. Yin Yangzi naturally knew about it from his residence. The branch family member sat on a futon while an old servant leisurely brewed tea beside him. The old servant's hands never stopped moving. "Master, what should we do about Bai Qiran and Shao Chun?" Yin Yangzi took a sip of tea and said nonchalantly, "There's no hurry. Let's wait until the matter at Heavenly Een Valley is over. Who knows, that little guy might give us a surprise." The little guy Yin Yangzi was referring to was naturally not Bai Qiran, but Shao Chun. The old servant was a little taken aback and sighed softly. "Master, are you really going to give up on Bai Qiran? Although he has some problems with his character, he's still a chosen on the saint ranking." In the entire Taiyang sect, only the old servant called Yin Yangzi master. After all, he had served Yin Yangzi since he was young and had always regarded himself as Yin Yangzi's retainer. He had never held any position in the Taiyang sect, even when he was a half-step great saint. Hearing the old servant sigh, Yin Yangzi said softly, "Survival of the fittest, survival of the fittest. There is nothing we can do about it." The enmity between Shao Chun and Bai Qiran was growing deeper and deeper. Especially after Shao Chun killed Bai Qiran, there was no room for reconciliation between the two. As a result, Yin Yangzi could only choose to give up on one of them. Based on the current situation, Yin Yangzi clearly favored Shao Chun more. The old servant knew very well what Yin Yangzi was thinking, so he didn't say anything else and just quietly brewed tea. While the outside world was in an uproar because of Bai Qiuyue's death, Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chen Yu, and Tian Yu stood on a short mountain in heavenly Een Valley with their eyes closed. Based on their slightly restless auras, the four of them were clearly about to break through. After almost 5 months of cultivation, the four of them had also begun to break through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Although they had broken through slightly later than Xiao Chun, it wasn't too late. Moreover, once they broke through, the Sacred Palace's strength would definitely increase tremendously. The four of them broke through with their eyes closed. Beside them, the Qing Emperor and the others had their eyes slightly closed as they stood on guard. As for Xiao Chun, he was currently standing at the edge of the mountain with a young woman in green. Both of them had very indifferent expressions as they looked down at heavenly Een Valley below. The young woman was none other than Lien Yao, who'd helped him in the past. Xiao Chun and the others had met Lien Yao 3 days ago. At that time, Chun Ling and the others had already begun to break through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Lien Yao had taken the initiative to look for Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun didn't dislike her, but he didn't have a good impression of her either. So long as she didn't offend him, Xiao Chun wouldn't take the initiative to offend her. After all, Lien Yao was supported by the other chosen on the Heavenly Een rankings, Yin Kunyo. Xiao Chun didn't know much about Yin Kunyo, but he was certain that she was definitely much more difficult to deal with than Bai Qiran. It wasn't just in terms of strength, even their temperaments weren't on the same level. Senior sister, there's no harm in being frank. Both of them had been silent for quite some time. In the end, Xiao Chun was the first to break the silence. Lien Yao turned around to glance at Xiao Chun when she heard Xiao Chun, and then she said slowly, "Do you know what sort of commotion you'll cause if you kill Bai Qiuyue?" "It doesn't matter. In any case, it's impossible for Bai Qiran and I to coexist peacefully," Xiao Chun replied indifferently. "The ignorant are fearless. Have you thought about relying on Senior Sister Yin? With Senior Sister Yun's protection, even Bai Qiran won't dare to touch you at all." Lien Yao spoke with slight displeasure when she heard Xiao Chun, but she quickly changed the topic and started to rope in Xiao Chun. "Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 1304. Lien Yao took the initiative to rope Xiao Chun in. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun revealed a faint smile and stared at Lien Yao with a faint smile. He didn't expect Lien Yao to say such a thing. Facing Xiao Chun's gaze, Lien Yao's pretty face blushed, and she said in a somewhat displeased voice, "What's wrong?" She took the initiative to rope Xiao Chun in, but after hearing this, Xiao Chun didn't give a clear answer. On the contrary, he kept staring at her, which made Lien Yao very uncomfortable. In the face of Lien Yao's questioning, Xiao Chun smiled, withdrew his gaze, and said indifferently, "This shouldn't be Yin Kunyo's idea, right?" Lien Yao was trying to rope him in on behalf of Yin Kunyo, but Xiao Chun guessed that this was actually Lien Yao's idea and not Yin Kunyo's. The reason was very simple. Although Xiao Chun had only met Yin Kunyo once, Xiao Chun was certain that Yin Kunyo was an extremely arrogant woman. With her character, she definitely wouldn't take the initiative to rope him in. As for why Lien Yao did this, according to Xiao Chun's understanding, it was probably to allow Yin Kunyo to have more power in the Heavenly Een Sun sect. To put it bluntly, Lien Yao felt that Xiao Chun might be able to defeat Bai Qiran. When the time came, Xiao Chun would replace Bai Qiran's position and become the new chosen on the saint rankings of the Heavenly Een Sun sect. In this way, if Xiao Chun was willing to submit to Yin Kunyo, it was imaginable how much power Yin Kunyo would have in the Heavenly Een Sun sect. From then on, Yin Kunyo would definitely be the only voice in the main branch. Lien Yao did this for Yin Kunyo's sake, but she clearly didn't know Xiao Chun well enough. Before Lien Yao could answer, Xiao Chun glanced at her slightly changed expression and said indifferently, "Unfortunately, it's a pity that I don't submit to others. But it's a pity. I've never had the habit of relying on others. Maybe it's because of my personality since I was young. I don't like to lower my head to others." Xiao Chun's words were a clear rejection of Lien Yao's invitation. Upon hearing this, Lien Yao's expression turned completely cold. She glared at Xiao Chun and said with a hint of anger in her voice, "Xiao Chun, do you know that without Senior Sister Yin Kunyo's help, You will definitely die once the heavenly Een Valley is over. And Bai Qiran will definitely not let you off. She did not expect that Xiao Qian would reject her so directly. He did not even think about it. This made Lien Yao feel humiliated. Therefore, she could not help but feel angry. However, Xiao Qian didn't care about Lien Yao's anger at all. First of all, Xiao Qian wasn't afraid of Lien Yao at all with his current combat strength. Secondly, even if he faced Bai Qiran, Xiao Qian wasn't afraid at all. Just because he didn't want to provoke her didn't mean that he was afraid. Therefore, Xiao Qian replied with a smile on his face. You don't have to worry about that. I've already said that we'll deal with whatever comes our way. As for who will emerge victorious in the end, I'm afraid we still don't know. Xiao Qian wasn't afraid of Bai Qiran and the Bai family, nor did he have any intention of borrowing Yun Kunyo's power. Lien Yao didn't say anything else after hearing Xiao Qian's words. I hope Junior Brother doesn't regret it. Lien Yao turned around and left. In Lien Yao's opinion, Xiao Qian didn't know what was good for him. He even dared to reject Yun Kunyo's recruitment. Didn't he know how many people in the heavenly Een solar sect wanted to follow Yun Kunyo, but failed? With Yun Kunyo's strength and status, she didn't need to take the initiative to recruit anyone in the heavenly Een solar sect. To put it bluntly, she only needed to say a word, and there would definitely be many people willing to work for her. However, Xiao Qian clearly wasn't among them. No matter what status Yun Kunyo had, Xiao Qian wouldn't rely on her. Or rather, Xiao Qian didn't want to rely on others. The same was true for the heavenly Een solar sect. If it weren't for the fact that the heavenly Een solar sect was structured like an alliance, Xiao Qian probably wouldn't have agreed to let the sacred palace rely on the heavenly Een solar sect. Therefore, even now, Xiao Qian still didn't treat himself as a disciple of the heavenly Een solar sect. Of course, Enyangzi didn't force Xiao Qian either. This was the fundamental reason why Xiao Qian was willing to stay in the heavenly Een solar sect. Lien Yao left without looking back. As soon as she left, Qin Shiru and the other two girls came to Xiao Qian. 100 Flower Fairy asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Did the negotiation fall apart?" She wanted me to rely on Yun Kunyo, but I rejected her. Xiao Qian naturally didn't hide anything from 100 Flower Fairy and told the three girls the truth. 100 Flower Fairy's smile didn't fade when she heard Xiao Qian's words. I knew you would say that, but I'm afraid there will be some trouble in the future. Although Xiao Qian's rejection today didn't offend Yun Kunyo, it definitely offended Lien Yao. If Lien Yao took the initiative to find trouble with Xiao Qian in the future, Xiao Qian naturally wouldn't stand by and do nothing. Therefore, 100 Flower Fairy seemed to have guessed that there would be a lot of trouble in the future. They hadn't dealt with Bai Qiran yet, and now there was the possibility of offending the even more terrifying Yun Kunyo. Xiao Qian smiled bitterly in his heart when he heard 100 Flower Fairy's words. Given Xiao Qian's impression of Yun Kunyo, if she were to find out about what had happened today, it would not only be a possibility, it would definitely be very troublesome. Yun Kunyo would definitely come looking for trouble with him. As for the reason, it was very simple. Yun Kunyo was like a queen who wouldn't allow anyone to disobey her. Therefore, after today's incident, Yun Kunyo would definitely seek revenge. But even then, Xiao Qian still didn't regret his choice. It couldn't be helped. Xiao Qian wasn't willing to rely on others, and he wouldn't lower his head. Who cares? There will be a time when it'll be resolved. He didn't want to think about it anymore. After waiting on the short mountain for 3 days, Chunling, Longqing, Qinyu, and Tianyu finally broke through successfully. All 4 of them had successfully broken through from the perfection of the Dao Emperor Realm to the perfection of the Dao Emperor Realm. Xiao Qian heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. After all, their breakthroughs were definitely good news for the Sacred Palace. Before their breakthroughs, the 4 of them already possessed the strength of the top 10 candidates. Now that they'd broken through together, their strength would definitely not be inferior to Lien Yao and Zhu Mujue. It could be said that the breakthrough of Chun Ling and the other 3 had forcefully raised the strength of the Sacred Palace faction to a whole new level. Although their numbers were still small, their strength had improved by leaps and bounds. Xiao Qian estimated that the current Sacred Palace faction, with just the 5 of them, will be able to contend with the other 5 factions outside of the main faction, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1305. Chun-Ling and the other three's breakthroughs had indeed dispelled the haze in Xiao Chen's heart to a large extent. It also gave Xiao Chen hope. Yes, Xiao Chen wasn't alone. He had Chun-Ling, Long Qing, and the others by his side. As long as everyone worked together, Xiao Chun didn't believe that they wouldn't be able to gain a foothold in the Taiyang sect. Imagine if the Sacred Palace had 4 or even 5 chosen on the saint ranking. At that time, even the main branch would have to bow their heads. Everything still depended on strength. Chun-Ling and the other three's breakthroughs gave Xiao Chen hope. With the haze in his heart swept away, Xiao Chen smiled and congratulated the 4. He then told them what Lien Yao had said. When they heard that Lien Yao wanted a rope in Xiao Chen, the 4's attitude was the same as Xiao Chen's. None of them agreed. The disciples of the Sacred Palace had never had the habit of relying on others or submitting to others. Xiao Chen and the others no longer thought about it. Over the next month, they continued to cultivate step by step. With the help of the Yin stones, Xiao Chen's cultivation had completely stabilized. Moreover, he was indeed much stronger than when he had just broken through. Of course, apart from Xiao Chen, the others also had their own gains. Seeing that the half-year period in the Heavenly Yin Valley was about to end, everyone had gained a lot in the past 6 months. However, with the end of the Heavenly Yin Valley, the Sacred Palace would soon have to face the wrath of the Bai family and Bai Qiran. More than a month passed in the blink of an eye for cultivators of Xiao Chen's level. On this day, Xiao Chen and the others finished refining the last batch of Yin stones on their bodies. They stood side by side on a plain and looked at the distant horizon. Today was the day that the Heavenly Yin Valley ended, and everyone would be forcibly teleported out. What will come sooner or later. Let's see what the Bai family wants this time, Xiao Chen said indifferently as he looked straight at the sky. There is no doubt that the Bai family and Bai Qiran were waiting outside Heavenly Yin Valley. Xiao Chen had expected this. Having learned about the natal talisman from Lien Yao, Xiao Chen knew that Bai Qiue's death could not be concealed. Therefore, Xiao Chen could guess the reaction of the Bai family and Bai Qiran. Chun-Ling and the others remained calm when they heard Xiao Chen's words. Regardless of whether it was the Bai clan or Bai Qiran, none of them feared them. They had long been prepared to deal with the arrival of this day. Not long after Xiao Chen's words sounded, a mysterious energy enveloped everyone's bodies. Under the cover of this energy, no one had the slightest intention to resist. They could only allow themselves to be forcefully transported out of the Heavenly Yin Valley. Not only Xiao Chen and the others, but the other disciples of the major factions who had entered the Heavenly Yin Valley were also transported out one by one. In less than 10 minutes, many disciples appeared outside the Heavenly Yin Valley one after another. However, when they appeared, the first thing they saw was the main branch disciples led by Bai Qiran and the Bai family experts led by Bai Mulin. This time, the Bai family was clearly furious. Not only did they send Bai Mulin, a quasi-saint supreme venerate, but they also sent 8 saint stage experts. When they saw Bai Qiran and Bai Mulin standing outside the Heavenly Yin Valley with gloomy expressions, the disciples understood what had happened. After all, the news that Xiao Chen had killed Bai Qiue had already spread in the Heavenly Yin Valley. It was no secret. Almost all the disciples who had entered the Heavenly Yin Valley knew about it. The disciples of the major factions didn't want to get involved in this mess, so they naturally took the initiative to step aside. Bai Qiran didn't say anything about this and allowed them to leave. Compared to the disciples of the other factions, the people of the main branch who belonged to Bai Qiran's camp respectfully came before her. The leader of the group, a dozen or so prospective saints, spoke with some apprehension. Seeing your brother, they were all on Bai Qiran's side, so they naturally felt apprehensive when facing her. After all, Bai Qiue was killed in the Heavenly Yin Valley, so they couldn't escape responsibility. However, Bai Qiran didn't get angry. She looked at the dozen or so people in front of her and interrupted them before they could speak. "Where's my brother's corpse?" She didn't reprimand or blame them. Instead, she asked where Bai Qiuyue's corpse was. Upon hearing Bai Qiuran's question, one of the prospective saints hurriedly took out Bai Qiuyue's corpse. Looking at the corpse, killing intent gathered in Bai Qiuran's eyes, but she eventually waved her hand and said to a main branch disciple behind her, "Send my brother back first." She ordered someone to send Bai Qiuyue's corpse back, while Bai Qiuran continued to wait outside the heavenly Yin Valley with her people. This time, Bai Qiuran didn't hold back at all. There were thousands of main branch disciples behind her, all of whom were on her side. Moreover, all of them were elites, and the weakest was a core disciple. Naturally, no one dared to provoke such a lineup. Even Lian Yao and Zhu Mujue, who also belonged to the main branch, didn't dare to provoke Bai Qiuran. Instead, they left with their people. Of course, no one wanted to provoke Bai Qiuran, but they didn't go far. After all, no one wanted to miss such a storm. For a time, more and more disciples gathered outside the heavenly Yin Valley. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, Shao Chun and the others from the sacred palace finally appeared in front of everyone on the square. At a glance, they saw Bai Qiuran and the main branch disciples blocking their way. Shao Chun's group didn't change their expressions in the slightest. Shao Chun even sneered. "What a big lineup. Bai Qiuran, it seems that you're only that bold. To think that you'd have to put on such a big lineup before you dare to come and denounce us." His words were filled with disdain. Killing intent flashed in Bai Qiuran's eyes when she heard this. The disciples of the various factions began to whisper amongst themselves. Most people naturally thought that Shao Chun had died because he didn't know what was good for him. Lian Yao even snorted coldly. "You really don't know what's good for you. Do you really think that Bai Qiuran won't dare to kill you? Or do you think that the few of you from the sacred palace are enough to contend with the thousands of people behind Bai Qiuran?" Lian Yao was naturally unhappy with Shao Chun's rejection. Now that Shao Chun still didn't know what was good for him, she couldn't help but feel angry. Perhaps in Lian Yao's opinion, Shao Chun should be kneeling in front of her and begging for Yun Kunyo to protect them. After offending Bai Qiuran, Yun Kunyo was the only one in the entire Taiyang sect who could protect Shao Chun and the others. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1306. Lian Yao felt that Shao Chun was courting death. She looked at Shao Chun with a sneer, as if she was looking forward to Shao Chun being killed by Bai Qiuran on the spot. Shao Chun naturally didn't know what Lian Yao was thinking because he didn't have the time to pay attention to this woman. From the beginning to the end, Shao Chun's eyes were locked on Bai Qiuran. In the face of Shao Chun's gaze and his casual words, the killing intent in Bai Qiuran's heart had risen to the extreme. Not only did he kill Bai Qiuyue, but he also dared to be so arrogant in the face of death. When their eyes met, the killing intent in Bai Qiuran's eyes seemed to have turned into two sharp blades. However, Shao Chun didn't seem to feel Bai Qiuran's killing intent at all. His expression didn't change at all, and the corners of his mouth even curled into a faint smile. Half a year was enough for the situation to change a lot. For example, now that he was facing Bai Qiuran, Shao Chun didn't feel as great pressure as he did half a year ago. The difference between a 99-meter talent and a 98-meter talent seemed to be only 1 meter, but the difference was far from that simple. Bai Qiuran believed Bai Qiuyue's words and gave Shao Chun half a year. It could be said that this was Bai Qiuran's biggest mistake. In this half a year, Shao Chun had survived the most dangerous period. It also allowed Shao Chun to grow and possess the ability to contend with Bai Qiuran. Although Shao Chun's strength wasn't necessarily stronger than Bai Qiuran's, it definitely wouldn't be easy for Bai Qiuran to kill Shao Chun. This was the change brought about by half a year. Shao Chun was still calm in the face of Bai Qiuran. In response, Bai Qiuran snorted coldly and said, "Shao Chun, today is the day you die." With that, Bai Qiuran directly attacked. She took a step forward and threw a punch at Shao Chun. In the face of Bai Qiuran's attack, Shao Chun didn't reply. However, he also moved. Instead of dodging, he moved to meet Bai Qiran. Seeing that Xiao Qian didn't dodge and wanted to meet Bai Qiran head-on, the surrounding disciples were stunned. They all looked at Xiao Qian as if they were looking at an idiot. This guy is definitely stupid. He actually dares to meet Bai Qiran head-on? Does he really have a death wish? Many of the disciples had such thoughts in their hearts. Since Bai Qiran was able to become one of the saints on the holy rankings, her strength was definitely undeniable. The reason was simple. The holy rankings of the central world were created by the will of the heavenly way, so there was no possibility of falsification. Without strength, no matter how high one's status was, it was impossible for one to enter the holy rankings. Under everyone's gaze, Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran's fists collided in midair. However, the expected scene of Xiao Chun being severely injured didn't happen. Along with a muffled explosion, the ground where they stood collapsed and layers of ripples appeared in the space. To everyone's surprise, Xiao Chun was indeed at a disadvantage in the collision of their fists. Xiao Chun was forced back several steps by Bai Qiran, but he didn't suffer any injuries. This result left countless people dumbfounded. He had blocked it. He had actually blocked Bai Qiran's punch. Moreover, he was only at a disadvantage and did not suffer any substantial injuries. How was this possible? Unable to believe what they saw, some of the disciples couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Not only were the disciples surprised, but Bai Qiran also didn't expect this outcome. Or perhaps, as the person involved, he understood how powerful Xiao Qian was. In the collision of their fists, Bai Qiran clearly sensed that Xiao Qian's strength wasn't much weaker than his. Both of them were on par. Unable to accept this fact, Bai Qiran stared at Xiao Qian in silence. At the same time, even though Xiao Qian didn't say anything, he felt relieved. Xiao Qian was naturally aware of the progress he had made in the past 6 months. The Yin Wind Stone was indeed powerful. Not only could it help one break through and condense the spiritual energy in one's body, but Xiao Qian also felt that the Yin Wind Stone also had a certain effect on physical cultivation after refining many of them. However, it wasn't that obvious. It could be said that in the past 6 months in the heavenly Yin Valley, Xiao Qian had improved in all aspects. Not only did his cultivation increase, but his spiritual energy also became more condensed and his physical strength also improved a lot. It was completely different from half a year ago. However, Xiao Qian hadn't exchanged blows with Bai Qiran, after all, and he couldn't judge the depth of a person's strength based on their aura alone. That was why when facing Bai Qiran's attack, Xiao Qian chose to clash head-on in order to test the gap between him and Bai Qiran. The result was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise for Xiao Qian because after this clash, Xiao Qian discovered that the gap between him and Bai Qiran was very small. It was undeniable that Bai Qiran was indeed stronger than him, but definitely not by a lot. At the very least, Xiao Qian was capable of fighting Bai Qiran. Besides, as long as he was given more time, Xiao Qian was certain that he would be able to make up for the last bit of gap between them and defeat Bai Qiran. Xiao Qian was relieved, but Bai Qiran's feelings were the complete opposite. A person whom she viewed as an ant actually grew to this extent in just 6 months. Bai Qiran didn't expect it and wasn't willing to believe it. However, the truth was right before her eyes, and she couldn't refute it all. Damn it, she cursed in her heart. At the same time, Bai Qiran understood that she couldn't give Xiao Qian any more chances. Otherwise, she would really be shooting herself in the foot. Xiao Qian's growth was truly too swift, and it was swift to the point Bai Qiran was caught off guard. She couldn't give Xiao Qian any more chances or time. She had to kill this fellow today, no matter what. As she thought in her heart, Bai Qiran released a layer of faint fluctuations of lightning. It was the energy of the laws of lightning. At the same time, her aura rose incessantly, and it didn't take long for her to attain perfection in the Tao Emperor realm. As a chosen on the hallowed rankings, even though Bai Qiran's cultivation was only at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, her aura wasn't inferior to an ordinary Saint realm expert. Someone at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm actually possessed aura comparable to an ordinary Saint realm expert. This was how terrifying a chosen on the hallowed rankings was. The expressions of all the disciples in the surroundings changed when they sensed by Chiron's shocking aura. At the same time, some of them even spoke out. Senior Brother Bai is infuriated. Looks like Xiao Chun will definitely die today. Exactly. How could he possibly go against Senior Brother Bai? Senior Brother Bai is a chosen on the hallowed rankings. Begging to be collected, begging to be recommended. Chapter 1307. Earlier, when Xiao Chun took Bai Chiron's punch head-on, the expressions of the surrounding disciples changed. However, when Bai Chiron's aura erupted, the surrounding disciples instantly changed their minds. After all, Bai Chiron had made a name for herself in the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin for many years, and she was the chosen of the saint ranking. Xiao Chun, on the other hand, was just a nobody. Therefore, these disciples naturally thought more highly of Bai Chiron. Her terrifying aura spread wildly. At the same time, the law of lightning around her became denser. One could even see bolts of lightning crisscrossing around her. Facing Bai Chiron, who had made up her mind to kill Xiao Chun today, no matter what, Xiao Chun's expression did not change. At the same time, a terrifying aura burst out of his body. This aura was not much weaker than Bai Chiron's aura. The two could be said to be evenly matched. Sensing the aura in Xiao Chun's body, Bai Chiron's expression became even more anxious. At the same time, the killing intent in her heart became even denser. He must die. Today, she must kill Xiao Chun here. Otherwise, he will be a great threat in the future. With that in mind, Bai Chiron's storage ring flashed with light, and a short knife appeared in her hand. The short knife's shape was very strange. It looked like a dagger, but the head was flat and only had one edge. It was very short. At the same time, Bai Chiron held the knife in a reverse grip. This was the first time she had seen such a weapon. However, before Xiao Chun could react, Bai Chiron had already attacked. She slashed with the short knife in her hand and shouted coldly, "White water!" The knife technique Bai Chiron used was called the Bai clan's three blades. It was the Bai clan's top martial technique. It was at the mid-grade saint level. It was a minor level higher than Xiao Chen's 9 sifting sword chi and fish intestine sword finger. White water was the first of the Bai clan's three blades. As soon as the knife was unleashed, Bai Chiron's spiritual energy frantically surged towards the blade. At the same time, the law of lightning rapidly gathered. A moment later, a white saber light streaked across the sky. It was shaped like a white fish. At first glance, Bai Chiron's attack didn't exude any terrifying aura, but Xiao Chun, who was facing it directly, sensed a fatal danger from it. Therefore, Xiao Chun did not have time to think too much. With a thought, the dustless sword appeared in his hand. He suddenly slashed out with a 9 sifting sword chi. Two saint rank martial skills collided. However, Bai Chiron's three swords were at the mid-rank of the saint rank, while the Azure sword chi was only at the low rank of the saint rank. So, Xiao Chun knew from the very beginning that a single strand of Azure sword chi would definitely be unable to stop Bai Chiron's attack. After the first slash, Xiao Chun did not pause at all. He slashed out 2 more times in succession. A total of 3 strands of Azura sword chi shot towards Bai Chiron's white fish. The 3 strands of Azura sword chi would definitely be able to stop Bai Chiron's attack, Xiao Chun thought. However, to his surprise, after the 2 attacks collided, Xiao Chun's 3 strands of Azura sword chi were easily destroyed by Bai Chiron's attack. Shock flashed through Xiao Chun's eyes. He could not believe it. How is this possible? Even if Bai Chiron's 3 swords were at the mid-rank of the saint rank, 3 strands of Azure sword chi should not be unable to stop a single attack. There was no time to think because Bai Chiron's attack had already broken through Xiao Chun's 3 strands of Azure sword chi and was heading straight for Xiao Chun. He had no choice but to raise his sword to block. The dustless sword and Bai Chiron's blade collided. Because he had already used 3 strands of Azure sword chi before, he had not been able to stop the attack, but he had indeed lost a lot of power. After coming into direct contact with Bai Qiuran's attack, Xiao Qian finally sensed the power of the attack. Furthermore, he could roughly guess why the 3 strands of Azura sword Qi could not stop Bai Qiuran's attack. It was not because of the difference in martial skills, nor was it because of the difference in grade. It was because of the power of laws. Bai Qiuran's law of lightning was clearly much more powerful than Xiao Qian's laws of force and laws of speed. The reason the 3 strands of Azura sword Qi hadn't been able to stop Bai Qiuran's attack was because the gap between their laws was truly too obvious. Xiao Qian's Azura sword Qi was enhanced by the laws of force and laws of speed, while Bai Qiuran was naturally enhanced by the laws of lightning. Their laws weren't equal at all. That was why even though Xiao Qian had successively executed 3 strands of Azura sword Qi, he was still unable to stop Bai Qiuran's attack. In the end, he was able to stop Bai Qiuran's attack safely. However, Bai Qiuran started laughing coldly when she saw this. An ant will always be an ant. Xiao Qian, do you think you can fight me just because you've broken through? Do you know that there are countless people in the younger generation of the Central World who have broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm, but only 108 of them were able to ascend onto the hallowed rankings in the end? The gap between them isn't something that can be made up for with a similar level of cultivation. So what if you've broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm? Do you think you possess the strength to go against me? Bai Qiuran had naturally discerned Xiao Qian's strength. To be honest, it had exceeded Bai Qiuran's expectations, but it wasn't to the point that Bai Qiuran was helpless against him. After all, there were only 108 chosen on the hallowed rankings in the entire Central World. If he could go against the chosen on the hallowed rankings by merely equaling their cultivations, then wouldn't it mean that the chosen on the hallowed rankings were trash? Bai Qiuran shouted coldly. Xiao Qian was filled with a myriad of emotions when he heard this. Xiao Qian wasn't too far behind Bai Qiuran in terms of cultivation, but it was different in other aspects. For example, Bai Qiuran was clearly much stronger than him in terms of the laws. The laws, Xiao Qian muttered inwardly. He didn't expect to be at a disadvantage in terms of the laws in the end. Of course, this was to be expected. After all, a cultivator's strength wasn't just judged by their cultivation. Bai Qiuran struggled to block Bai Qiuran's attack. Seeing this, Bai Qiuran didn't give Xiao Qian any time to catch his breath. She immediately charged at Xiao Qian with her blade in hand. Bai Qiuran sneered at Xiao Qian, her eyes overflowing with killing intent. Xiao Qian, I won't make the same mistake twice. I must kill you today. I won't give you the slightest chance. Bai Qiuran had listened to Bai Qiuyue's words and given Xiao Qian half a year's time for nothing. In the end, not only did she fail to eliminate Xiao Qian, but she also lost Bai Qiuyue's life. At this moment, Bai Qiuran understood that eliminating Xiao Qian was an urgent matter. She couldn't give Xiao Qian the slightest chance or time. This guy's speed of improvement was too terrifying. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1308. Bai Qiuran was determined to kill Xiao Qian today. She did not care what price she had to pay. To be honest, Xiao Qian's rate of improvement had already made Bai Qiuran feel slightly terrified. In just half a year, Xiao Qian had already possessed such strength. If Xiao Qian was given another half a year, wouldn't even Bai Qiuran be able to suppress him? She knew that Xiao Qian was not much weaker than her in terms of cultivation. The gap between them lay in other aspects. One was accumulation. The other was comprehension of the power of laws. Accumulation was very simple. After all, Xiao Qian was not from the Central World. His accumulation was definitely not as good as Bai Qiuran's. The same was true for the power of laws. After all, there was no complete method to comprehend the power of laws in the Northern Star boundary. These 2 points were Xiao Qian's greatest weaknesses. With Xiao Qian's talent, Xiao Qian would definitely be able to make up for these 2 shortcomings in the shortest amount of time possible. Therefore, Bai Qiuran did not dare hesitate any longer. She did not dare give Xiao Qian any more chances. Xiao Qian was naturally at a disadvantage against Bai Qiuran's frenzied attacks. However, he was still able to resist for a while. After all, it was not half a year ago. Xiao Chun was no longer a helpless fellow against Bai Qiran. Bai Qiran did not feel the slightest bit of joy when she saw Xiao Chun gradually falling into a disadvantageous position. The reason was simple. Even though Xiao Chun had been suppressed by her, Bai Qiran had been unable to deal a fatal blow to Xiao Chun from beginning to end. Bai Qiran's goal in this battle was not to win, but to kill Xiao Chun. However, Xiao Chun was like a cockroach. She was unable to injure him at all. It felt like the battle was going on for a long time. The disciples in the surroundings were all stunned as they watched the intense battle between the two of them. Everyone looked surprised. They were surprised by the power that Xiao Chun had displayed. It's already been over 100 moves. Senior brother Bai still hasn't won. That's right. Even senior brother Zhu Mujue and senior sister Lian Yao wouldn't be able to last so long against senior brother Bai. You mean to say that Xiao Chen's strength is above senior Zhu Mujue and senior Lian Yao? Over 100 moves had passed, but the outcome of the battle still hadn't been decided. Moreover, everyone was able to discern that Bai Qiran wasn't holding back at all. Under Bai Qiran's all-out attack, Xiao Chun had actually managed to hold on. Even though he was at a complete disadvantage and was completely suppressed, he was still undefeated. This was enough to shock all the disciples in the surroundings. After all, just a moment ago, they thought that Xiao Chun was no match for Bai Qiran and would definitely be instantly killed. The atmosphere in the field became very strange. Bai Qiran, who clearly had the overall advantage, did not receive the support of a single person. On the other hand, although Xiao Chun was at a disadvantage, he still shocked everyone. Even Lian Yao, who disliked Xiao Chun, was stunned on the spot, and she spoke with slight disbelief. How could he be so strong? Didn't he just break through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm? Xiao Chun had broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm in Heavenly Yin Valley, and he'd broken through less than half a year ago. There was no need to doubt that. However, it was exactly this person who could be said to have just broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm, yet he was able to go toe-to-toe with Bai Qiran. At the very least, Lian Yao knew that she was unable to accomplish that. She was shocked. Right at this moment, a young woman in a black dress suddenly appeared by Lian Yao's side. Lian Yao hurriedly bowed respectfully when she sensed the young woman's appearance. Senior sister. The person who had come was none other than the other holy son of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, Yun Kunyo. Yun Kunyo paid no attention to Lian Yao's thoughts and just gazed indifferently at the intense battle below. To be more precise, Yun Kunyo's gaze was mostly on Xiao Chun. A wisp of bright light flashed through her eyes from time to time. No one knew what Yun Kunyo was thinking. Yun Kunyo's appearance didn't alarm too many people, but Bai Qiran grew more and more impatient as the battle dragged on. She felt that the battle couldn't drag on any longer. As such, Bai Qiran actually disregarded the existence of the numerous disciples in the surroundings and shouted coldly to Bai Mu Shuang and the other disciple from the main branch behind her, "Attack! Kill the members of the sacred palace." As a chosen on the hallowed rankings, Bai Qiran had actually given up on a fair battle with Xiao Chun and had chosen to gang up on him. Clearly, such an action would cause all the disciples present to oppose it. It was indeed so. As soon as Bai Qiran finished speaking, the disciples in the surroundings were first stunned, but it wasn't long before they revealed a wisp of disdain. For a time, Bai Qiran's prestige in the hearts of the disciples dropped significantly. From beginning to end, Chun Ling, Long Qing, and the others had no intention of interfering at all. Even Xiao Chun dared to fight Bai Qiran fairly, but Bai Qiran was cowardly. What could the disciples think? Bai Qiran knew the consequences of such an action, but she couldn't care less about that right now. She only had one thought in her mind, and that was to kill Xiao Chun as soon as possible. As long as she could kill Xiao Chun, she didn't care about anything else. As for losing face, that could only be dealt with in the future. Following Bai Qiran's cold shout, the main branch disciples behind her were all stunned. Clearly, as Bai Qiran's subordinates, they had never expected her to give such an order. In the end, Bai Mushuang was the first to recover from his shock and roared, "Kill!" With Bai Mushuang's command and him taking the lead, everyone finally recovered from their shock and charged toward Xiao Chun. As the Bai family and the main branch disciples attacked, the Sacred Palace group naturally wouldn't allow themselves to be captured without putting up a fight. Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chun Yu, Tian Yu, and the others were the first to attack, followed by Emperor Qing and the others. It was about to turn into a chaotic battle, and once it did, the outcome was obvious. How could the Sacred Palace group be a match for the Bai family and the main branch disciples? However, just as the battle was about to erupt, two figures suddenly appeared beside Xiao Chun and Bai Qiuran. The two figures had appeared silently, and one of them had captured Bai Qiuran with lightning speed. One of them held Bai Qiuran's right arm, while the other held Bai Qiuran's throat. These two were none other than Long Yang and Feng Zhu, who had been staying in the Taiyang sect. Long Yang instantly subdued Bai Qiuran, and no one was able to react in time. At the same time, Long Yang revealed a faint smile as he looked at the people of the Bai family and the disciples of the main branch charging over and chuckled. "It's best if you don't move. I get nervous easily, and it won't be good if I accidentally hurt the young master of your Bai family. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 1309. Bai Qiuran had fallen into Long Yang's hands before she even had time to react. Part of it was Bai Qiuran's own carelessness. After all, Long Yang and Feng Zhu had appeared out of nowhere. Bai Qiuran was completely unprepared, but apart from that, the difference in strength between Bai Qiuran and Long Yang could not be ignored. If Long Yang did not possess enough strength to crush Bai Qiuran, he would not have been able to subdue Bai Qiuran so easily. A faint smile hung on Long Yang's face as he spoke in an indifferent voice. Following his words, the disciples from the main branch and the Bai clan, who were originally charging over in a menacing manner, all came to a stop. They had no choice. Now that Bai Qiuran had fallen into Long Yang's hands, they naturally did not dare to act rashly. Long Yang continued to smile when he saw everyone's actions. Very good. With that, he turned to look at Bai Qiuran. Bai Qiuran's expression was unimaginable after being firmly subdued by Long Yang. When she met Long Yang's gaze, Bai Qiuran could no longer hold back and shouted, "Long Yang, what do you mean? This is a matter of our Taiyang sect. What does it have to do with you? What right do you have to interfere?" Knowing that she was no match for Long Yang, Bai Qiuran shouted coldly. As soon as she finished speaking, Yin Kunyo's figure appeared on the battlefield, and she said expressionlessly, "Don't worry. Long Yang, this indeed has nothing to do with you." Even Long Yang and Feng Zhu had appeared, so Yin Kunyo naturally could not sit by and do nothing. The reason why she said that was not because she wanted help by Qiuran, but because this matter had nothing to do with Long Yang and Feng Zhu. To put it bluntly, the enmity between Xiao Chun and Bai Qiuran was a matter of the Taiyang sect. As members of the Beast clan, Long Yang and Feng Zhu naturally had no right to interfere. However, Long Yang remained unmoved when he heard Bai Qiuran and Yin Kunyo's words. He turned to Xiao Chun and smiled. "Brother Xiao Chun, what do you think? Just say the word, and I'll kill him for you right now." He didn't care about Bai Qiuran at all. Hearing Long Yang's words, Bai Mulin shouted coldly, "Long Yang, if you dare to kill Qiuran, my Bai family won't let you off." As a holy son ranked third on the saint rankings, Bai Mulin naturally knew about Long Yang. He was afraid that Long Yang would hurt Bai Qiuran. Bai Mulin couldn't care about anything else and shouted angrily. However, in the face of Bai Mulin's reprimand, Long Yang did not mind at all. He curled his lips and said, "What a joke. I will stand here and let you kill me. Do you dare?" Bai Mulin was a quasi-saint, but Long Yang didn't fear him at all. As a saint on the saint rankings, he had the protection of the will of the heavenly way. Would Bai Mulin dare to kill him? Hearing Long Yang's words, Bai Mulin's face was filled with unwillingness. That's right, would he dare to kill Long Yang? Obviously not. As long as he attacked Long Yang, the will of the heavenly way would definitely kill him immediately. Bai Mulin stood there angrily. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't attack Long Yang among his peers, let alone his Bai family. Even if it was the Sun Yang sect, who could be Long Yang's opponent? The matter seemed to have reached a stalemate. Long Yang had no intention of letting Bai Qiran go. The Bai family and the surrounding disciples didn't dare to act rashly. At this moment, Xiao Chun, who had been silent all this time, slowly walked to Long Yang's side and smiled. "Brother Long Yang, thank you. However, I must end this person's life with my own hands." Xiao Chun was naturally grateful for Long Yang and Feng Ju's appearance. He knew that the two of them were helping him. Otherwise, why would the two of them care about this matter? Long Yang didn't say anything after hearing Xiao Chun's words. Chun Ling and the others stood behind Xiao Chun with indifferent expressions. Xiao Chun wanted to kill Bai Qiran with his own hands. If they had heard this before, they would have definitely thought that it was a joke. However, after witnessing the battle between Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran with their own eyes, no one thought so anymore. Indeed, in terms of combat strength, Xiao Chun wasn't a match for Bai Qiran. However, it had only been half a year, and Xiao Chun already had the strength to contend with Bai Qiran. If Xiao Chun was given more time, it would be hard to say whether Bai Qiran would still be a match for Xiao Chun. Bai Qiran's strength was terrifying, but Xiao Chun's growth speed was even more shocking. As soon as Xiao Chun finished speaking, and everyone present had different expressions, the old servant beside Yin Yangzi appeared. With the appearance of the old servant, everyone present knew that Yin Yangzi already knew what had happened here. In fact, Yin Yangzi had been paying attention to everything here from the beginning. Firstly, he wanted to see how much Xiao Chun had grown in the past half a year. Secondly, he wanted to give Bai Qiran another chance. However, in the end, Bai Qiran made Yin Yangzi completely lose confidence. On the other hand, Yin Yangzi was extremely gratified by Xiao Chun's growth. He had grown to such a level in half a year. This was a monstrous prodigy with a 99-meter talent. He was far from what Bai Qiran could compare to. Therefore, after this incident, Yin Yangzi could be said to have completely given up on Bai Qiran and firmly chose Xiao Chun. The appearance of the old servant also represented Yin Yangzi's attitude. As soon as the old servant appeared, he looked at Xiao Chun with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. He sized him up before turning his gaze to Bai Qiran. "Long Yang, let him go. After all, he's a disciple of our Tianyin Taiyang sect," the old servant said. Long Yang pursed his lips, but still let Long Yang go. Bai Qiran was furious when she broke free from Long Yang's control. She was about to roar when the old servant spoke first. "All right, this matter ends here. Bai Qiran, take your people and leave. And you, the Bai family, must leave the Tianyin Taiyang sect by today." The old servant's words were clearly protecting Xiao Chun. Bai Qiran's anger grew. She had to get rid of Xiao Chun as soon as possible. She couldn't give him any more time or opportunity. Bai Qiran knew this very well. Now, the old servant actually wanted her to leave and even wanted to expel the Bai family. This was undoubtedly protecting Xiao Chun. The old servant's attitude naturally represented Yin Yangzi's attitude. No matter how stupid Bai Qiran was, she knew what Yin Yangzi meant. However, she was unwilling to give up. Therefore, after the old servant finished speaking, Bai Qiran stood there with no intention of leaving. Seeing that Bai Qiran had no intention of obeying, the old servant exuded a faint chill and shouted, "Bai Qiran, didn't you hear what I said?" The old servant was a little angry, but at the same time, Xiao Chun took a step forward and stood in front of Bai Qiran. The two faced each other, and Xiao Chun said indifferently, "Bai Qiran, you want to kill me? Perfect, I want to kill you too. I'll give you a chance. In 3 months, we'll fight to the death. Do you dare?" Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 13:10. Xiao Chun took the initiative to propose a 3-month battle with Bai Qiran. As soon as he said that, the surrounding disciples burst into an uproar. After all, once the battle was decided, there was no way to change it. At that time, Both Xiao Chun and Bai Qiuran would have to rely on their own strength and wouldn't be able to rely on anyone else. No one expected Xiao Chun to propose a battle to the death with Bai Qiuran at this time. Moreover, it was only 3 months away. What would they do in 3 months? At their level, 3 months would pass by just casually cultivating in seclusion. Some people thought that Xiao Chun was crazy. The appearance of the old servant and his attitude undoubtedly showed that he was here to protect Xiao Chun. At this time, Xiao Chun didn't even need to say anything. Bai Qiuran definitely couldn't do anything to Xiao Chun today because the old servant represented Yin Yangzi. They clearly didn't need to do anything to resolve the crisis at hand. However, Xiao Chun took the initiative to propose a battle to the death with Bai Qiuran. The time was only 3 months later. Everyone had their own thoughts, but compared to them, Bai Qiuran was a little uncertain. If it were before, Bai Qiuran would definitely agree without hesitation if Xiao Chun proposed a battle to the death under such circumstances. After all, it was only 3 months later. What would they do in 3 months? But it was different now. Xiao Chun's improvement in the past 6 months had made Bai Qiuran feel a fatal threat. Now, Xiao Chun took the initiative to propose a battle to the death in 3 months. To be honest, Bai Qiuran wasn't confident at all. Who knew how much Xiao Chun would grow in 3 months with his talent? Therefore, Bai Qiuran didn't want to agree to Xiao Chun's battle to the death. Bai Qiuran wanted to kill Xiao Chun on the spot to prevent future trouble. Unfortunately, the old servant beside Yin Yangzi was present. Bai Qiuran definitely couldn't succeed. Moreover, Long Yang and Feng Zhu were standing beside Xiao Chun. Under the overall situation, it was obviously impossible for Bai Qiuran to kill Xiao Chun on the spot. If she persisted, not only would she bring disaster to herself, but also the Bai family. There were only 2 choices before Bai Qiuran. She could either leave with her people or agree to Xiao Chun's battle to the death. She glared at Xiao Chun, and the murderous intent in her eyes was almost tangible. However, Xiao Chun did not mind at all. He smirked coldly and met Bai Qiuran's eyes without backing down. The 2 of them stood facing each other. After a long silence, Bai Qiuran finally said, "Fine, I'll kill you in 3 months." Bai Qiuran suppressed the killing intent in her heart and turned around with a cold snort. "Let's go." She immediately left with her subordinates. As Bai Qiuran left, Yin Kunyo took a deep look at Xiao Chun before leaving as well. The old servant beside Yin Yangzi came up to Xiao Chun and said with a smile, "Thank you for your help. Let's go. Master wants to see you." The master the old servant mentioned was naturally Yin Yangzi. Xiao Chun nodded and told Long Yang, Feng Zhu, and the Sacred Palace people to leave first. He followed the old servant to Yin Yangzi's residence. With Yin Yangzi's declaration, the other factions wouldn't dare to openly attack the Sacred Palace faction. Xiao Chun arrived at Yin Yangzi's residence for the first time under the old servant's lead. There was an ethereal mountain peak that looked like a paradise. A simple thatched hut stood on top of the mountain peak. Outside the hut was a small courtyard. At first glance, it looked like the residence of an ordinary farmer. Moreover, not far from the thatched hut, there were a few vegetable fields. There were already many green vegetables growing in the fields. Who would have thought that this was Yin Yangzi's residence? The great sage actually lived in the same place as an ordinary farmer. Xiao Chun arrived at the courtyard under the old servant's lead and saw Yin Yangzi sitting on a praying mat. Yin Yangzi slowly opened his eyes when Xiao Chun arrived. He smiled and pointed to another praying mat in front of him. "Have a seat." He didn't exude any aura at all, just like an ordinary farmer. Xiao Chun sat down in front of Yin Yangzi and took the initiative to cup his hands together. "Thank you for your help, ancestor." "Haha, there's no need to thank me. You should thank yourself." Yin Yangzi smiled nonchalantly. Xiao Chun didn't feel any pressure when he was with Yin Yangzi. It was as if he wasn't the great sage at all. He also didn't have the imposing aura of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. On the contrary, one could feel calmness, peace, and simplicity from Yin Yangzi. In other words, Yin Yangzi was like the warm sun. Xiao Chun couldn't help but feel more relaxed when he was with him. At least, that was the case for Xiao Chun right now. Xiao Chun chatted with Yangzi on and off, but it was only about trivial topics. Yangzi sensed that Xiao Chun seemed to have something to say, but he still smiled and said, "What's wrong? If you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to stutter." Xiao Chun obviously had something on his mind, but he was too embarrassed to say it. Now that Yangzi took the initiative to point it out, Xiao Chun might as well just say it. That patriarch, the 4 patriarchs of our sacred palace, they? Xiao Chun wanted to ask about Xiao Sheng's group of 4. Ever since Xiao Chun returned, he hadn't seen Xiao Sheng's group of 4. Previously, he heard from Qin Shiru that Xiao Sheng's group of 4 had gone into seclusion. However, half a year had passed, and Xiao Sheng's group of 4 still hadn't shown up today. This made Xiao Chun suspicious. Upon hearing Xiao Chun's words, Yangzi smiled and said, "Don't worry, the 4 of them are still in seclusion, but they should be coming out soon." With that, Yangzi waved his hand, and a mirror formed from spiritual energy appeared in front of Xiao Chun. Through the mirror, Xiao Chun saw the scene of Xiao Sheng's group of 4 cultivating in seclusion. Seeing that Xiao Chun's group of 4 was indeed in seclusion and wasn't in any danger, Xiao Chun breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, Xiao Chun didn't know that the reason why Xiao Sheng's group of 4 cultivated so desperately was because they felt that their cultivation was too low. Although the 4 of them were quasi-sage great sovereigns, their cultivation was only at the initial stage of the quasi-sage stage. This kind of cultivation wasn't considered too high in the central world. To put it bluntly, in the central world, if a quasi-sage sect didn't have a great sovereign at the perfect stage of the quasi-sage stage overseeing it, it had almost no right to speak. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 13:11. Xiao Sheng and the others also knew that their cultivation was still too low in the central world, especially as the strongest in a sect. They had no right to speak. In addition to having talented juniors, a sect must also have true experts. Talented juniors represented the future of a sect, while true experts could bring strength and peace to the sect. It was impossible to have only talented juniors without true experts. Of course, the opposite was also true. The current problem of the Sacred Palace was that they only had talented younger disciples, but no true powerhouse overseeing them. Compared to other quasi-saint sects, the cultivation of Xiao Sheng and the other 3 was indeed too low. The 4 of them were only at the initial stage of the quasi-saint realm. Therefore, Xiao Sheng and the others knew very well that what they needed to do the most now was to improve their strength. As for other things, they were just floating clouds. Because as long as Xiao Sheng and the others improved their strength, many things in front of them would be nothing more than floating clouds. Take the Bai family, for example. If the Sacred Palace had a half-step great sage, would the Bai family dare to openly come to the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin to ask for people? Xiao Chun also knew what Xiao Sheng and the others were thinking now. Moreover, after confirming that the 4 of them were only in closed-door cultivation and were not in any danger, Xiao Chun was also relieved. That was good. No longer worried about Xiao Sheng and the others, Xiao Chun asked Yangzi, "Patriarch, there's one more thing I would like to ask about. It's about the power of laws." During the battle with Bai Qiran, Xiao Chun discovered his 2 biggest weaknesses. One was the gap in martial skills, and the other was the gap in the power of laws. In fact, these 2 gaps could not be blamed on Xiao Chun because this was the embodiment of a lack of foundation. In the North Star boundary, the highest grade of martial skill was the Saint grade low level. There was nothing higher than that. As for the power of law, there was no perfect cultivation method. Compared to the North Star boundary, the Central world was far superior in these aspects. Let's talk about martial skills first. In the human territories of the Central world, as long as one had reached the level of a quasi-sage sect, almost all of them would have a mid-grade sage level martial skill. It was just a matter of quantity. As for the cultivation of the power of law, the Central world had a complete system and cultivation method. Martial techniques and the power of laws were what Xiao Chun needed to improve the most of the moment. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yin Yangzi smiled and said, I knew you would ask. You didn't know the meaning of the three realms of laws before, did you? Or perhaps you've never heard of the three realms of laws, right? Yes, the three realms of the laws. Upon hearing Yin Yangzi's words, Xiao Chen nodded honestly. He had indeed never heard of the three realms of the laws. He nodded honestly. Upon seeing this, Yin Yangzi said slowly, in that case, before I tell you about the cultivation of the power of law, this old man will first tell you about the three realms of laws. The three realms of laws are actually the three realms of a martial artist's comprehension and control of the power of law. In the central world, they're called the three realms of laws. In detail, they're divided into the worldly realm, the perceptive realm, and the transformative realm. The worldly realm is the entry level. It refers to the initial comprehension of the power of law, but is unable to control and use it flexibly. The perceptive realm refers to the initial comprehension of the power of law. It refers to the ability to use flexibly and skillfully control the power of law. As for the final transformative realm, it refers to the complete control of the power of law. It is no longer limited to the level of comprehension. After briefly explaining the differences between the three realms of laws for Xiao Chun had the most intuitive understanding of the three realms of laws after hearing Yin Yangzi's words. With a thoughtful expression, he murmured softly, worldly realm, perceptive realm, transformative realm, three realms of laws. This was the first time Xiao Chun had heard of the three realms of laws. After all, in the North Star realm, there was no such detailed system of the power of law. Everyone just relied on their feelings. After giving a simple and intuitive introduction to the three realms of laws for Xiao Chun, Yin Yangzi paused for a moment before continuing. As for your current comprehension of the power of development, it is only at the worldly realm. Although you have reached the limit of the worldly realm, you have not broken through to the perceptive realm. You are unable to skillfully use and control the power of law. Yin Yangzi could tell at a glance what level Xiao Chen's comprehension of the power of law was at. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun did not have any objections. After hearing Yin Yangzi's words, Xiao Chen also felt that his understanding of the power of law was indeed too shallow. Moreover, all these years, Xiao Chun did not spend too much time and energy on comprehending the power of law. This was also one of the fundamental reasons why Xiao Chen's comprehension of the power of law was only at the limit of the worldly realm. Previously, Xiao Chun did not pay much attention to the power of law. However, after the battle with Bai Qiran, he softly experienced the terror of the power of law. The power was indeed so powerful that it made one's heart tremble. To put it bluntly, the reason why Bai Qiran could suppress Xiao Chun now was more because of the gap between the power of law between the two of them. After a long silence, Xiao Chun finally asked, Patriarch, do you know what level Bai Qiran's power of law is at? He's at the second level of the perceptive realm. However, he has not reached the peak and is still quite a distance away from the third level of the transformative realm. So he's at the second level of the perceptive realm. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. However, there was a gap of one level. Bai Qiran's power of law was indeed completely crushing Xiao Chen's power of law. This was undeniable. After knowing the three realms of the laws and the level of Bai Qiran's power of law, the next step was to explain how to cultivate the power of law. The central world did indeed have a complete system for cultivating the power of laws, but it didn't mean that a cultivator could easily comprehend and improve their power of laws just because they had such a system. To put it bluntly, the function of such a system was more of a guide. As for the specific cultivation method, it actually still depended on the individual's efforts, time, and effort to comprehend and understand. Therefore, even with the existence of such a system, it was not easy to comprehend or improve the power of laws. Of course, there were naturally many cultivation mystic realms in the central world that were dedicated to cultivating the power of law. Cultivating in them would naturally yield twice the results with half the effort. It could be said that he explained all kinds of knowledge about the power of law to Xiao Chun without holding back. In the end, Yin Yangzi looked at Xiao Chun and said indifferently, "The Tianyin and Taiyang sects naturally have mystic realms dedicated to cultivating the power of laws, but they're not the best. If you want to break through to the second level of the power of laws as soon as possible, I can point you in the right direction. However, the choice is still up to you. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 13:12. He taught Xiao Chun all kinds of knowledge about the power of laws in detail. At the end, Yin Yangzi even said that he knew of a place that could be considered one of the best in the entire central world for cultivating the power of laws. Originally, if Xiao Chun wanted to cultivate the power of laws, the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin had such a cultivation secret realm. However, the secret realm that the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin used to cultivate the power of laws could only be considered ordinary in the central world. It was completely incomparable to the place Yin Yangzi mentioned. Therefore, Yin Yangzi felt that if Xiao Chun wanted to cultivate the power of laws, he should go there to maximize his gains. Hearing Yin Yangzi's words, Xiao Chun looked at Yin Yangzi curiously. Seeing this, without waiting for Xiao Chun to speak, Yin Yangzi said with a smile, "Don't worry, you can naturally go there. Where's this place?" Xiao Chun asked. "The Dragon Clan." In the Dragon Clan, there is a secret realm called the Culvert of Myriad Methods. It is recognized as the best place to cultivate the power of laws in the central world. The effects of cultivating the power of laws in the Culvert of Myriad Methods are far more terrifying than in the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin. Moreover, with Long Yang by your side and your second sister Long Qing, I think it is very likely that you will go to the Culvert of Myriad Methods. The Culvert of Myriad Methods was the place that Yin Yangzi wanted Xiao Chun to go. As a human, it was basically impossible for Xiao Chun to enter the Culvert of Myriad Methods. However, Xiao Chun was different. He had Long Yang and Long Qing. As a result, Xiao Chun might be able to enter the Culvert of Myriad Methods. After all, although the Culvert of Myriad Methods was extraordinary for the Dragon Clan, it did not involve the Dragon Clan's roots. It was not a forbidden area and could be open to outsiders. It was just a matter of whether the Dragon Clan was willing to or not. Of course, Yin Yangzi's idea had another meaning, but Yin Yangzi did not say it out loud. Since Xiao Chun and Bai Qiran had agreed to meet in 3 months, with Yin Yangzi's understanding of Bai Qiran, he definitely would not obediently wait for 3 months. Given Bai Qiran's current killing intent toward Xiao Chun, he would definitely do everything he could to get rid of Xiao Chun in the next 3 months. As a result, it would be very dangerous for Xiao Chun to remain in the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin. After all, Yin Yangzi could not keep an eye on Xiao Chun all the time. Moreover, it was easier to dodge a spear in the open than to hide. It was easier to avoid a spear in the open, but it was harder to avoid an arrow in the dark Yin Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin. Also, it was killing Xiao Chun. Not only would he have the opportunity to enter the Culvert of Myriad Arts, but he would also be able to reduce the threat of Bai Qiran to the greatest extent. Once Xiao Chun broke through the power of laws, he would be able to fight Bai Qiran openly and completely eliminate the threat that was Bai Qiran. Of course, Yin Yangzi did not tell Xiao Chun about this. When Xiao Chun and Yin Yangzi met, just as Yin Yangzi expected, Bai Qiran was indeed thinking the same thing. He could not give Xiao Chun another 3 months. Not to mention 3 months, Bai Qiran did not want Xiao Chun to live another day. For some reason, Bai Qiran would panic as long as Xiao Chun was still alive. He did not have the calmness and composure that a chosen on the saint ranking should have. The main reason was that Xiao Chun's rate of improvement was just too shocking. Who knew how much he would grow in 3 months? Bai Qiran could still suppress Xiao Chun right now. But what if Xiao Chun surpassed him in 3 months? As a result, Bai Qiran had decided that he would not give Xiao Chun any chance. As long as it was possible, he would directly kill Xiao Chun, regardless of the method or consequences. As long as he could kill Xiao Chun, Bai Qiran would do anything. Sitting in the main hall with a cold expression, Bai Qiran looked at the candidates below and said coldly, "Keep a close eye on Xiao Chun. I don't care what Xiao Chun is doing. You have to report to me as soon as possible. I want to know everything about Xiao Chun." She had people keep a close eye on Xiao Chun's every move. As long as she was certain that Yin Yangzi was not protecting Xiao Chun, Bai Qiran would immediately take action. She would directly charge into Xiao Chun's dwelling and kill him. The Chosens naturally knew what Bai Qiran meant when they heard that. They didn't say anything and just nodded respectfully in response. Right now, the only problem was Yin Yangzi. With Yin Yangzi's protection, Bai Qiran would not be able to do anything to Xiao Chun. However, Bai Qiran refused to believe that Yin Yangzi could do nothing but protect Xiao Chun in 3 months. As long as Yin Yangzi showed even the slightest bit of carelessness, Bai Qiran would not hesitate to directly attack Xiao Chun. Right now, he could only wait for an opportunity. He waved his hand and dismissed everyone. Afterwards, Bai Qiran also stood up and walked to the backyard alone. He wanted to see Bai Qiuyue's corpse and discuss with his uncle, Bai Mulan. Bai Qiran clearly did not expect Yin Yangzi to send Xiao Chun to the Dragon Clan. She wondered what kind of expression he would have when he received the news. Yin Yangzi could guess what Bai Qiran was thinking, but he did not care. Yin Yangzi could cripple Bai Qiran with a single sentence, but that would be meaningless. First of all, Yin Yangzi could not kill Bai Qiran himself. After all, he was a candidate on the Saint rankings. If he wanted to cripple Bai Qiran, he could only cripple Bai Qiran's status. That would be of no use to Xiao Chun. Secondly, if Yin Yangzi did it, Xiao Chun would not agree. Therefore, all Yin Yangzi did all this time was to create more buffer time for Xiao Chun, so that Xiao Chun could grow and face Bai Qiran head-on. After giving Xiao Chun this suggestion, Xiao Chun actually did not object to going to the Dragon Clan. As a result, Xiao Chun agreed very quickly. However, he still had to discuss this matter with Long Qing. Even though Long Qing would not refuse, Xiao Chun would not make a decision on his own without asking for her opinion. After he finished talking about the power of laws, Yin Yangzi took out 2 jade stones from his storage ring and handed them to Xiao Chun. He then said calmly, "Don't worry. These 2 technique relaying jade stones record 2 upper-class martial skills. They are the absolute Yin footwork art and the scorching sun sword art. They are the absolute martial skills of the Tian Yin Yang sect. You can practice them yourself, but you cannot teach them to others." Apart from the power of laws, Xiao Chun's martial skills were also a major shortcoming. Yin Yangzi obviously knew this, so Yin Yangzi gave Xiao Chun 2 high-grade saint-level martial skills. It could be said that Yin Yangzi treated Xiao Chun very well. At the same time, he also had high expectations for him. He did not even hesitate to teach the absolute Yin footwork technique and the scorching Yang sword technique to Xiao Chun. After all, these 2 martial skills could be considered as 2 of the most powerful martial skills in the Taiyang sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 13:13. The absolute Yin footwork technique and the scorching sun swordsmanship were 2 Saint-class superior martial skills that were invaluable. They were considered one of the top martial skills in the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Under normal circumstances, it was only possible to cultivate these 2 martial arts techniques if one had made a great contribution to the sect. Even many saints were not qualified to cultivate these 2 martial arts techniques. However, Xiao Chun had obtained these 2 martial arts techniques without doing anything. Although there were many Saint-class martial skills in the Central World, most of them were Saint-class inferior or Saint-class martial skills. Saint-class superior martial skills were generally only possessed by great saint sects and great saint clans. However, Yin Yangzi did not hesitate to give the absolute Yin footwork technique and the scorching sun swordsmanship to Xiao Chun. It was enough to show how much he valued Xiao Chun. Knowing the value of these 2 martial skills, Xiao Chun did not refuse. He was not a hypocrite. Xiao Chun calmly accepted these 2 martial skills. However, At the same time, Xiao Chan felt a sense of belonging to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Of course, he respected Yin Yangzi even more. Xiao Chun was not someone who did not know what was good for him. Xiao Chun remembered Yin Yangzi's kindness to him. At the same time, if Yin Yangzi or the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect needed him in the future, Xiao Chun would definitely do his best. Without saying too much, Xiao Chun silently remembered everything. Seeing this, Yin Yangzi laughed with relief. Aha, you are becoming more and more to my liking. All right, go and prepare to go to the Dragon Clan. I believe that with your means, it will not be difficult for you to enter the 10,000 Arts Culvert. Yin Yangzi was not too worried about Xiao Chen's trip to the Dragon Clan. Firstly, the will of the Heavenly Way had not announced the start of the 100 Races War. At this time, the Dragon Clan would not kill Xiao Chen. Furthermore, with Long Yang and Long Qing around, there was no need to worry about Xiao Chen's safety in the Dragon Clan. Now, all that was left was to enter the 10,000 spell culvert. However, given Yin Yangzi's understanding of Xiao Chun, this shouldn't be a problem for him. After all, this kid had safely returned from the demon race's territory to the human race's territory. Xiao Chen nodded upon hearing Yin Yangzi's words, but put on an awkward expression as he said, "Patriarch, I'm heading to the dragon race, but there's something I'd like to ask of you." Naturally, Qin Shu and the others were most worried about Xiao Chen's departure. Yin Yangzi smiled. "Don't worry, there are only a dozen people from the Sacred Palace. Don't worry, I will send someone to protect them. In addition, I can let everyone from the Sacred Palace try out all the cultivation secret realms in the Heavenly Yin Sun sect for free for a year. Is that enough?" Yin Yangzi knew what Xiao Chen was worried about, so he agreed readily. Upon hearing Yin Yangzi's words, Xiao Chen no longer hesitated. He immediately got up, bowed to Yin Yangzi, and left. With Yin Yangzi's guarantee, there was no need to worry about the Sacred Palace's safety. After all, Bai Qiuran's real target was him. Once he left, Bai Qiuran would not place too much emphasis on the Sacred Palace's people. Moreover, Yin Yangzi also promised to let the Sacred Palace's people use all the cultivation secret realms in the Heavenly Yin Sun sect for free for a year. This way, Xiao Chen wouldn't have to worry about their cultivation. He knew that Yin Yangzi was taking care of the Sacred Palace's people. Of course, the reason Yin Yangzi did this was inseparable from the Sacred Palace's people's talents. After all, apart from Xiao Chun, Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chen Yu, and Tian Yu's talents had all reached 98 meters, while the others' talents were all above 98 meters. With such a group of talents, it was understandable that more resources were given to them. After Xiao Chen left, the group didn't leave and continued to wait in the cave abode. Everyone gathered in the hall, and Xiao Chen told everyone about his intention to visit the dragon race. In the end, Xiao Chen looked at Long Qing and asked, "What do you think, second sister?" Xiao Chen still attached great importance to Long Qing's wishes. Although the dragon race's 10,000 Arts Culvert was very attractive to Xiao Chen, if Long Qing didn't want to go to the dragon race, Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't force her. At worst, he could just cultivate in the Heavenly Yin Sun sect. Although the effects would definitely be much weaker than the 10,000 Arts Culvert, it wasn't something unacceptable. In response to Xiao Chen's question, Long Qing pondered for a moment before saying, "It's fine. Since little brother wants to go to the dragon race, I'll go with him. I'll have to go sooner or later anyway." Long Qing agreed. Next, Xiao Chen began to explain some matters after he and Long Qing left. This time, Xiao Chen didn't plan to bring Qin Shu and the other girls with him. He didn't even plan to bring his big brother, Chun Ling and Xiao Chun. After all, Bai Qiuran hadn't been eliminated yet, and Chun Ling and Chun Yu were the strongest among them. Xiao Chun would feel more at ease if the two of them stayed in the Heavenly Yin Sun sect. Moreover, it wasn't appropriate for too many people to go to the dragon race. Therefore, Xiao Chun told everyone to stay and told them that Yin Yangzi had promised to let the Sacred Palace people use all the secret cultivation realms in the Heavenly Yin Sun sect for a year unconditionally. Everyone was stunned at first, but then they were overjoyed. Everyone had personally experienced the secret cultivation realms in the Heavenly Een Sun sect. The Heavenly Een Valley was indeed incomparably heaven-defying. Being able to use all the secret cultivation realms for free was a great help to everyone's cultivation. Overjoyed, Xiao Chen didn't say much about it. After comforting Qin Shru and the other girls, Xiao Chen made a detour to Long Yang and Feng Ju's residence. They were drinking in the courtyard again. When he saw Xiao Chen walk over, Long Yang smiled and said, "What's the matter, brother Xiao Chen? Are you here to drink with me? We can drink anytime." "I'm here today to discuss something with brother Long Yang," said Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen didn't hide anything and told Long Yang about his trip to the dragon race, including the fact that he wanted to use the 10,000 arts culvert to cultivate. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Yang nodded without hesitation and said, "Okay, it's a piece of cake. Don't worry, brother Xiao Chen. Leave it to me. Although the 10,000 arts culvert is good, it's not a forbidden area. It's not a problem at all. When do you plan to leave, brother Xiao Chen?" Long Yang originally stayed in the Heavenly Een Sun sect to bring Long Qing back to the dragon race. Now that Xiao Chen took the initiative to ask, how could he refuse? As for the 10,000 arts culvert, it was a piece of cake for Long Yang. After all, it didn't involve the heritage or secrets of the dragon race. Letting Xiao Chen cultivate there for a period of time wasn't a problem at all. He couldn't wait to ask Xiao Chen when he would leave. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Since brother Long Yang is in such a hurry, let's leave tomorrow morning. Please add me to your collection. Monthly votes recommend me." Chapter 13-14. They would leave tomorrow. Long Yang naturally did not refuse Xiao Chen's request. After the two of them finished their discussion, Xiao Chen quickly took his leave. After deciding to go to the Dragon Clan, Xiao Chen naturally did his best to appease Qin Shru and the others that night. After all, the four of them were very displeased that he did not bring them with him. However, there was nothing he could do. It was indeed unsuitable to bring too many people to the Dragon Clan this time. They also understood Xiao Chen's difficulties, so even though the four of them still grumbled, they already understood in their hearts. After a night of silence, Xiao Chen woke up early the next morning and instructed Qin Shru and the others to cultivate in peace in the Heavenly Een Taiyang sect. Afterwards, he embarked on the journey to the Dragon Clan with Long Qing, Long Yang, and Feng Ju. The departure of Xiao Chun and the others was personally arranged by Yin Yangzi's old servant. As a result, even though Bai Qiran had arranged for people to secretly monitor Xiao Chen's every move, no one discovered that Xiao Chun had already left the Heavenly Een Taiyang sect. They had no idea that Xiao Chun had already left. Of course, this was also Yin Yangzi's intention. He wanted to temporarily get rid of Bai Qiran. Under the arrangements of Yin Yangzi's old servant, Xiao Chun and the others secretly left the Heavenly Een Taiyang sect through the teleportation formation. After leaving the Heavenly Een Taiyang sect, Xiao Chun and the others did not waste any time. They used the teleportation formation, and a day later, they arrived at the border between the human and beast territories. It was still the same wide Heavenly Chun River, and there were still two groups of experts guarding the border. However, it was clearly much smoother this time. On the human side, Xiao Chun had Yin Yangzi's token, so naturally, there were 5 people who dared to stop him. They did not even encounter him by chance. They directly let him through without any inspection. After successfully crossing the Heavenly Chun River from the human territory, they once again returned to the beast territory. Thinking back to how Xiao Chun, Long Yang, and Feng Ju had also entered the human territory not long ago, Xiao Chun could not help but feel a trace of emotion in his heart. Revisiting an old place, but the experience was completely different. This time, Xiao Chun did not have to hide his identity at all. This was because Long Yang had already sent the news of Xiao Chun and Long Qing back to the Dragon Clan and the Dragon Emperor himself. Since the Dragon Emperor already knew about this, Xiao Chun was equivalent to being protected by the Dragon Clan. In addition, there was Princess Feng Ju by his side. With the support of the Dragon Clan and Huang Yi Clan in the Beast Territory, There was probably no one who dared to have any ideas about Xiao Chun. As soon as they landed on the side of the beast territory, a beast expert appeared and looked coldly at Xiao Chun. Because Xiao Chun did not hide his identity, the beast expert naturally recognized that Xiao Chun was from the human race at a glance. Therefore, he asked coldly, "Human race? Why are you here? If you can't give me a reason, I'll let you rest here forever." Clearly, this beast expert did not have much goodwill towards the human race. On the contrary, he was very hostile and revealed a strong murderous intent as soon as he appeared. However, as soon as he said this, before Xiao Chun could say anything, Princess Fengjue coldly snorted and said, "You are from the tiger tribe, right? What a strong breeze. He is my friend. Why? Do you want to kill him?" Fengju's temper had never been good. Previously, this beast expert only paid attention to Xiao Chun and didn't pay too much attention to Long Yang, Fengju, and Long Qing. Hearing Fengju's words, the beast race expert looked at Fengju. He originally wanted to reprimand him, but when his gaze landed on Fengju, the beast race expert was dumbfounded. Princess Fengju, as one of the top 10 holy children on the saint leaderboard, the direct descendant princess of the Phoenix Huangyi clan, and the strongest person among the younger generation, Fengju was obviously very famous in the beast race. Therefore, the beast expert recognized Fengju's identity at a glance. But this was obviously only the beginning. After he recognized Fengju, Long Yang entered his field of vision. But when he saw Long Yang, he was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. The beast race powerhouse was no longer as arrogant as before. He stood there in a daze, apparently at a loss of what to do. Long Yang didn't make things difficult for him. Instead, he said calmly. He simply said, "He's my friend and also an honored guest of my dragon race. So, can we leave now?" "Young Master Long Yang, please, please," the beast man hurriedly said respectfully, at the same time gesturing for the young man to enter. Just like this, Xiao Chen's group left the heavenly Chen River under the escort of the beast expert. One had to admit that Long Yang and Fengju's status and prestige in the beast race was far from what Xiao Chun could compare to. Just like earlier, when they were on the human side, even though the human expert in charge of guarding the area was polite, it was more because of Yangzi's token and didn't have much to do with Xiao Chun. The beast expert was truly fearful of Long Yang and Fengju, while the human expert treated Xiao Chun more because of Yangzi's token. But this made sense. After all, Xiao Chun wasn't well known in the human race and wasn't even considered a holy child on the saint leaderboard, unlike Long Yang and Fengju, who were both in the top 10 of the saint leaderboard. Of course, Xiao Chun had absolute confidence in himself. This time, when he returned from the beast race, it would be the time for him to enter the saint leaderboard. Along the way to Delight City, Long Yang said to Xiao Chun, "Brother Xiao Chun, I've already told Father about this matter. Father told us to wait in Delight City and that the Dragon Clan's envoy will arrive in, at most one day, before we head to the Dragon Clan." Long Yang's father was naturally the Dragon Emperor. The Dragon Emperor had sent an envoy not for Xiao Chun, but for Long Qing. Long Qing was also the Dragon Emperor's biological daughter. Now that his biological daughter had returned, the Dragon Emperor naturally couldn't remain indifferent. He had to put on a good show and inform the beast race that the Dragon Clan's princess had returned. Xiao Chun naturally understood the meaning behind Long Yang's words, so he didn't object. Or rather, it would be useless even if he objected because this wasn't prepared for him in the first place. It didn't matter if it was a day earlier or a day later. The group quickly arrived at Delight City and stayed there. They rested for a night in Delight City. On the morning of the second day, when the sky had just begun to brighten, the citizens of Delight City were suddenly shaken and countless people rushed towards the city gates. The sudden bustle wasn't because something had happened in Delight City, but because the Dragon Clan's envoy had arrived. Seeing the endless stream of people rushing towards the city gates, Xiao Chun and the others had already woken up and were drinking tea and chatting on the second floor of the inn. Long Yang had a smile on his face as he looked at Long Qing, who was sitting beside Xiao Chun, and said, "Looks like from today onwards, you're really my little sister. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 13:15. It had to be said that the efficiency of the Dragon Clan was indeed very high. In just one night, the messenger of the Dragon Clan had arrived at Joy City. Long Yang looked at Long Qing and said with a smile. From the beginning, Long Yang had said that Long Qing was his sister. Unfortunately, Long Qing did not acknowledge this identity at all. Hearing Long Yang's words, Long Qing said snappily, "Who cares?" Long Qing did not have any feelings towards the Dragon Clan at all. The reason why she returned to the Dragon Clan this time was because of Xiao Chun. The four of them had no intention of leaving the city. After all, the Dragon Emperor had sent the messenger to welcome Long Qing's return. His purpose was also to announce to the world that Long Qing was the biological daughter of the Dragon Emperor. At the city gate of Joy City, a group of hundreds of people slowly arrived outside the city. This group of people were all from the Dragon Clan. The leader was a pure-blooded Dragon Clan with the cultivation of a half-step great sage. In addition, what was more surprising was that there was a luxurious dragon carriage in the middle of the group. It was dazzling in gold and jade and had an oppressive aura of nobility. Moreover, this dragon carriage was pulled by 4 adult flood dragons who had already reached the Saint Realm great perfection. Flood dragons pulling a carriage. What kind of concept was this? Thinking back to the North Star boundary, wasn't the first saint of the Myriad Beast Valley a flood dragon? Relying on his identity as a flood dragon, he could be said to have limitless glory in the North Star boundary. But now, the flood dragons like him had been reduced to pulling Long Qing's carriage. Of course, to these 4 flood dragons, they were probably very excited. After all, Long Qing was the princess of the Dragon Clan. In the Dragon Tribe, there was no comparison between the pure-blood Dragon Tribe and the Flood Dragon Tribe. To put it bluntly, the Flood Dragon Tribe was the slave of the Dragon Tribe. Therefore, it was not rare for the Dragon Tribe to use the Flood Dragon Tribe to pull the chariot. Of course, those who could enjoy this treatment must be the true descendants of the Dragon Tribe. Those who were not related to the Dragon Tribe could not enjoy this treatment. What's more, there were 4 flood dragons in charge of pulling the carriage this time. Apart from the Dragon Emperor, perhaps only Long Yang had enjoyed such treatment in the entire Dragon Clan. Now, in order to welcome Long Qing, the Dragon Emperor had set up the same formation. This showed how much importance he attached to Long Qing. The Dragon Clan's team slowly entered Joy City. Along the way, many Beast Clan cultivators were dumbfounded. Each and every one of them had a longing look on their faces. This was the power of the Dragon Clan, one of the 3 major clans of the Beast Clan. Any one of their teams was enough to make everyone present gasp in amazement. They already knew the inn where Long Yang and the other 3 were staying. Therefore, the team went straight to the inn where Long Yang and the other 3 were staying. The dragon carriage steadily stopped at the entrance of the inn's courtyard. Then, the leading half-step great saint from the Dragon Clan climbed up to the inn's 2nd floor alone. He saw Xiao Chun, Long Yang, and the other 3 who had been waiting there. He first scolded Long Yang with a smile. "Little brat, you're getting bolder and bolder. You actually dared to go to the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect. Haha, 3rd uncle. I'm just unpicking my sister. I went through so much trouble to come here. Not only did I not come back well, but I was also reprimanded by 3rd uncle. I feel so wronged." Long Yang smiled indifferently when he heard that. This half-step great saint from the Dragon Clan was Long Yang's 3rd uncle. He was the younger brother of the Dragon Emperor. His name was Long Fun. He was considered a famous expert in the entire Central World. He was one of the strongest people below the Great Sage. Long Fun looked middle-aged. He wore a luxurious purple-gold dragon robe with a lifelike golden dragon that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Although he did not emit any aura, as a member of the Dragon Clan, Long Fun naturally had the pride unique to the Dragon Clan. It made people not dare to look directly at him. Long Fun still had a timid look on his face. After hearing Long Yang's words, he glared at him and then turned his gaze to Longqing. Longfen immediately felt the pure aura of the dragon clan from Longqing's body. Therefore, Longfen immediately knew who Longqing was. At this time, there was no need for an introduction. Longfen had already said with a smile, "You must be Qing Er. Haha, you've grown up after so many years. Not bad, not bad." Longfen naturally knew about what happened back then. At the same time, he also understood how much his brother, the Dragon Emperor, loved Longqing. Back then, the Dragon Emperor did not accept Chunling's threat. Instead, he attacked in anger. This caused Longqing and Chunling to drift to the North Star Realm, causing Longqing to disappear. However, ever since Longqing disappeared, the Dragon Emperor had mobilized all his forces to search for Longqing. This incident caused quite a stir in the Central World back then. After all, if the Dragon Emperor wanted to find his daughter, he would definitely have to enter the territories of other clans. This naturally caused friction. It could be said that the Dragon Emperor had indeed exhausted all means and strength in order to find Longqing. Unfortunately, even after searching the entire Central World, he still could not find Longqing's whereabouts. This incident had happened many years ago. However, Longfen knew that his brother had never forgotten Longqing. After all, she was his only daughter. The Dragon Emperor was the emperor of the Dragon Clan, the great sage. However, he only had one son, Longyang. Although Longyang's talent was outstanding since he was young, Longqing's position in the Dragon Emperor's heart had always been there. There was no other way. This was his only daughter. Speaking of this, it was worth mentioning that the Dragon Clan's bloodline was noble. However, at the same time, it was extremely difficult for the Dragon Clan to reproduce. It was not just a problem of reproduction. For example, the incubation process of a young Dragon Clan would take 100 years or even longer. It was unlike the human clan, which could be done with a simple pregnancy of 10 months. It was precisely because of the difficulty of reproduction that although the pure-blooded Dragon Clan's individual strength was very strong, and every pure-blooded Dragon Clan was a powerhouse, their numbers were still too small. Although it was said that there were millions of pure-blooded Dragon Clan members in the Dragon Clan, most of them were from the Floating Cloud Clan, such as the Flood Dragon Clan, the Heaven-Devouring Python Clan, the Dragon Turtle Clan, and so on. The true pure-blooded Dragon Clan did not exceed 1,000 people. In other words, there were only a few hundred pure-blooded Dragon Clan members in the entire Dragon Clan. One could imagine how small their numbers were. However, although their numbers were small, once a Dragon Clan member reached adulthood, their Saint Realm would be stable. Even the weakest Saint Realm was like this. There were also many quasi-saints. It was also because of this super strong individual strength that the Dragon Clan could intimidate the Beast Clan and become one of the 3 major clans of the Beast Clan. Longqing sat on the chair expressionlessly. Upon hearing Longfen's words, she did not have the slightest reaction. She only said indifferently, "Can we go now?" She did not have the slightest respect for Longfen. Seeing this, Longfen did not say anything. Of course, he smiled and said, "Of course. Big Brother has been waiting for a long time. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 13:16. Longqing did not treat Longfen as her third uncle at all. Her tone was also extremely indifferent. Of course, there was no hatred in her voice. Longfen smiled embarrassedly and said, although he felt a little helpless about Longqing's attitude, he did not say anything. It was obvious that Longqing did not have a good impression of the Dragon Tribe. However, this was normal. After all, Longqing had never lived in the Dragon Tribe since she was young. Without saying anything else, the group immediately got up and walked out of the inn. At the entrance of the courtyard, Xiao Chun and the other 3 stepped onto the dragon carriage. With 4 dragons pulling it, they immediately soared into the sky. The Light City naturally prohibited flying. However, such a rule was obviously useless against the Dragon Tribe. Therefore, under the gazes of countless people, they immediately flew into the sky and quickly disappeared. After the Dragon Tribe left, the surrounding people began to discuss one after another. Of the two women just now, which one is the princess of the dragon tribe? You're really stupid. Of course it's the woman in the green dress. The woman in the red dress is Princess Fengju of the Phoenix Huangyi clan. The Dragon Emperor had long been aware of Long Qing's return. Therefore, everyone in Delight City knew that the Dragon Tribe's envoy was here to forcibly bring back the princess of a dragon tribe who had been missing for many years. Unaware of these people's discussions, Xiao Chun and the rest sat on the dragon carriage and quickly headed towards the Dragon Tribe's headquarters. Their speed was naturally extremely fast since they were being pulled by 4 flood dragons of Sage, accomplished realm. Sitting upright in the dragon carriage, Long Yang originally wanted Fengju to return. However, Fengju clearly did not agree. No matter what, she wanted to return to the dragon tribe with Long Yang. As the princess of the Phoenix Huangyi clan, Fengju was naturally not unfamiliar with the dragon tribe. The two clans had always been in contact. Therefore, Fengju had visited the dragon tribe many times. There were no delays along the way. Therefore, after 2 days, Xiao Chun and the rest finally arrived at the Dragon Valley, where the dragon tribe was located. The Dragon Valley was the name of the dragon clan. It was a huge valley. It was said to be the largest valley in the entire central world. There were endless mountain ranges on both sides of the valley. From afar, the Dragon Valley looked more like a plain than a valley. In the Dragon Valley, not only did the pure-blooded dragon tribe live there were also the Flood Dragon tribe, the Heaven-devouring Python tribe, the Dragon Turtle tribe, and other affiliated tribes of the dragon tribe. They all had one thing in common, and that was that their bodies contained the bloodline of the dragon clan. It was just more or less. In ancient times, these tribes obtained great power through the dragon clan's bloodline. But at the same time, they also became the Dragon Clan's vassals and obeyed the Dragon Clan for generations. The news of Long Qing's return had already spread among the Dragon tribe. At this moment, the dragon carriage slowly landed in the center of the Dragon Bones, in an incomparably huge city. There were already many members of the Dragon tribe in the surroundings, and there were at least 500 to 600 of them. 500 to 600 was not a small number. Compared to the Dragon tribe, which had less than 1,000 members, this was already a lot. This city was called Dragon City. Although it was huge, the population was very small. There were only a few 100,000 people. Of course, only the pure-blooded members of the Dragon tribe were qualified to live in Dragon City. Next were the guards and maids under their command, which added up to a few 100,000 people. 500 to 600 members of the Dragon tribe gathered in the main square of the city. They all wanted to see how the awakened princess of the dragon tribe looked like. Some of the younger members of the dragon tribe were whispering to each other. They were not considered the direct descendants of the dragon tribe, and could only be considered as collateral descendants. Naturally, their status was not as high as Long Qing's. Therefore, at this moment, they were all thinking that if they could have a relationship with the new princess of the dragon tribe, wouldn't they be able to reach the top in a single bound? With each of them having their own thoughts, Long Qing, Xiao Chun, Long Yang, and Fengju slowly walked down from the dragon chariot as the crowd raised their heads in anticipation. When they saw Xiao Chun, many members of the dragon tribe were stunned. Soon after, someone asked in confusion, "Why is there a human here?" The appearance of a human had clearly caused many members of the dragon tribe to be extremely confused. Of course, Xiao Chun did not care about this at all. Under Long Fun's lead, the group walked into the main hall at the center of the city. No one stopped them along the way. After Xiao Chun and the rest left, the many members of the dragon tribe in the square outside the hall burst into an uproar. Everyone was filled with confusion when a human had appeared here. At the same time, everyone was discussing Long Qing incessantly. They knew Long Qing's identity at a glance. After all, they were all members of the dragon tribe. They were extremely familiar with Long Qing's aura and knew that Long Qing was the princess of the direct line of descent who had been missing for many years. She was the true daughter of the Dragon Emperor. Many disciples of the younger generation fell head over heels for Long Qing's beauty. Many of them even said that they wanted to pursue Long Qing. Xiao Chun and Long Qing were naturally unaware of everything that was happening in the square outside the hall. At this moment, the group had already entered the main hall. The magnificent main hall was brightly lit. Countless luminous pearls were embedded on the walls, illuminating the originally dim main hall. In the main hall, Xiao Chan finally saw the Dragon Emperor and a group of elders from the Dragon tribe. There were more than 10 of them. Among them, the Dragon Emperor sat high on the main seat. He looked middle-aged. Just like Long Fun, he wore a purplish-gold dragon robe with a lifelike golden dragon embroidered on it. Compared to Long Fun, the Dragon Emperor was obviously more majestic. It was especially so for his pair of eyes, which were as though an emperor looking down on the common people. However, even someone like the Dragon Emperor couldn't help but reveal a slight change in his expression when he saw Long Qing strolling toward him. There was excitement, joy, and self-blame. When Long Qing stood in the middle of the hall, before Long Fen said anything, the Dragon Emperor vanished from the throne and appeared before Long Qing. "Daughter," the Dragon Emperor called out softly. Then, he reached out to caress Long Qing's face. But to everyone's surprise, Long Qing instinctively took a step back and avoided the Dragon Emperor's hand. The Dragon Emperor's hand hovered in midair helplessly after Long Qing avoided it. He looked at the silent Long Qing with gloomy eyes. After a few moments, the Dragon Emperor withdrew his hand and revealed a dejected smile to Long Qing. "Daughter, do you hate me?" He thought that Long Qing was holding a grudge against him. After all, he didn't fulfill his responsibility as a father. But after hearing the Dragon Emperor's words, Long Qing shook her head and said calmly, "There's nothing to hate. I've been living well all these years." Long Qing said, and lifted her head to look at the Dragon Emperor. The father and daughter faced each other, and for an instant, the Dragon Emperor was at a loss for words. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. If you want to chat about Sword Master of 8 Desolation with more like-minded people, follow me on WeChat. Chat about life. Find a confidant that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.